Story 1. My dad mocked me as a dropout and threw me out at his birthday dinner. He had no clue I secretly built a $21 million empire and owned a beach house. Everything began when I was Haim, 33 years old, a woman who had established a $21 million firm from scratch with no college education. For years, I was the silent force behind my family, paying bills and easing responsibilities while they looked down their noses at my unusual work choices. Then, at my father's 62nd birthday dinner last month, everything went wrong. He didn't simply call me uneducated trash. He ordered me to leave his residence. What he didn't realize then was how successful I'd gotten. I grew up in a middle-class area in Columbus, Ohio. The expectations were as obvious as they were traditional. College followed by a nice, steady career. My father, Henrik, who had worked as an accountant for the same firm for 3 decades, was convinced that a degree was the only way to succeed. My mother, Elizabethette, an elementary school teacher, silently shared his sentiments. But even at age 10, I felt different. My siblings, Kevin and Sophia, were contentedly following the straight and narrow, whilst I was running an elaborate lemonade stand equipped with loyalty cards and various varieties. By the age of 14, I was fixing computers for neighbors at a quarter of the cost of the local stores. My folks simply saw them as adorable hobbies. Haim needs to focus on academics, my father would say during supper. These games won't pay the bills when she grows up. High school passed in a rush. My grades were good, but my true love was reading business books and following entrepreneurs online. While Kevin and Sophia piled up outstanding extracurriculars for college applications, I started an online company selling personalized phone cases that I developed myself. I earned about $2,500 before graduating. To please my parents, I enrolled in community college. A single semester, that was all it took to reinforce my gut instincts. This regimented setting, these instructors who had never ran a real business, it all felt like a prison. When I addressed my parents about dropping out, the argument lasted several days. "You will throw your life away," my father yelled, his cheeks flushed. "No child of mine will be a college dropout working minimum wage jobs forever." Nevertheless, I left. I was 18 with only $2,500 saved from my many side hustles and ready to wager on myself. The first few months were terrible. I rented a little flat in a sketchy neighborhood, the type where you never did laundry after dark. I survived on ramen and inexpensive foods while working 18-hour days on my e-commerce site. My first 3 business ventures were all failures. I lost money in a drop-shipping venture. My social media management service failed due to underpricing, and my handmade jewelry was unable to scale. Each failure felt like a hit in the belly, but it also taught me a hard lesson. I learned about supply chains, client contracts, and scalability through first-hand experience rather than textbooks. When I met Isabel, my life changed. She was 20 years older and had several successful exits under her belt. And she noticed something in me that my family never did. She became the mentor I urgently needed, providing me real business advice without passing judgment on my lack of a degree. "Education comes in many forms, Haim," she informed me over coffee. "Some of the most successful people I know learn by doing, not sitting in classrooms." At 21, I debuted my refined business plan with Isabel's guidance. An e-commerce platform that connected small American manufacturers with customers looking for locally manufactured products. The timing was ideal, riding a wave of enthusiasm for supporting small firms and home production. The early days demanded all. My modest apartment became a temporary office. My futon functioned as a couch, and I worked from 5 a.m. till 11 p.m. managing everything from website coding to customer support. 8 months had passed when the breakthrough happened. A well-known lifestyle blogger featured one of our artisan partners, and orders came in. It was chaotic in the best sense. I worked for 72 hours straight fulfilling orders and improving our website. That single feature generated $12,500, more than I'd ever seen in my account. I excitedly called my parents. My father responded with wary skepticism. "That's lovely, honey, but it's probably only temporary. You know, you may always return to college once this thing has run its course." His words stung, but they also sparked fire. I'd show him wrong, not through arguments but with undeniable success. The following 6 years were a world of constant expansion and new problems. My platform, Heartland Made, has grown from 27 artisan partners in 3 states to over 400 across all 50. Every step of development resulted in a new fire to put out. Our server failed during a large promotion. I remained up 48 hours with developers personally responding to consumer emails. A larger competition attempted to grab our top sellers. I drove to visit with each one, fostering relationships and boosting our commission. The most challenging period came in year 2 when cash flow nearly choked us. We were growing too quickly with inventory demands surpassing sales. I went without compensation for 4 months, downsized to an even smaller flat, and obtained longer payment terms. Those months taught me financial discipline, which would be important. Milestones added up. Our initial office had 3 employees and generated over $1 million in annual revenue. Following everyone's departure, I celebrated alone in my office with a single glass of champagne. Throughout it all, I kept my burgeoning success hidden from my family. They knew I had an internet business that was going well, but I was always downplaying its true size. Their first discouragement had built a barrier I couldn't overcome. Part of me hoped they'd ultimately ask thorough questions to demonstrate true curiosity, but such conversations never happened. Despite their lukewarm support, I never ceased assisting them financially. When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer in year 4, I discreetly paid the $75,200 in medical bills that her insurance could not cover. My father described a lucky insurance payout that saved them. He never suspected. My brother Kevin required $41,000 for a down payment on his home. I produced a family loan and a second account that appeared to be from a distant relative. He gladly accepted the money and continued to make comments about my need for a real job with benefits. My sister Sophia's fantasy wedding was dashed when her fiancé lost his job. I paid the $55,000 gap for the venue and caterers. Sophia knew the money was from me, but at family events, she'd downplay it by mentioning Haim's small online firm, which had a successful year. The gap between my actual success and my family's perspective was causing a deep internal turmoil. By day, I was leading strategy meetings for a multimillion-dollar company, making decisions that impacted hundreds of partner businesses, and negotiating with big retail chains. By night, I was receiving texts from family members who regarded me as if I were a college dropout who happened to get lucky with the internet. My company's headquarters grew to a full floor in a downtown office building with 37 full-time employees. Our valuation is $21 million based on a Business Insider profile. I retained majority ownership, even declining takeover proposals that would have made me wealthy but cost me control of my vision. As my father's 60th birthday neared, I reached a conclusion. It was time to be honest, not to brag, but to finally overcome the preconceptions and possibly win the respect I had been pursuing for years. I bought a significant gift, a fully funded retirement investment account, which I intended to present along with the truth about my company at his dinner. I prepped my speech the night before. I wasn't the same insecure 19-year-old anymore. I was a successful entrepreneur who provided possibilities for hundreds of American manufacturers and dozens of employees. Surely, that would earn my father's respect and alter the way my family perceived my unique route. Couldn't have been more wrong. The evening of his birthday began well enough. Their residence had the same furniture and photos. The sole new item was a giant television Kevin had purchased, which was prominently displayed as his donation. My mother showed me her normal controlled tenderness, a short hug and pat. "You look nice, Haimie. Did you cut your hair?" It was the same haircut I'd had for 3 years. Kevin and his wife, Anukika, arrived dressed smartly and exuded upper-middle-class status. Sophia and Matteo followed, and Sophia immediately began telling anecdotes about her rise at the accounting firm. Following in Dad's footsteps, "The partners are hinting I might make junior partner next year," she told me. Youngest in firm history. I received no questions regarding my work during the pre-dinner chat. When Matteo suggested an e-commerce piece, Kevin quickly shifted the focus to his son's minor league accomplishments. Dinner was Mom's traditional pot roast served on fine china. My father, seated at the head of the table, accepted comments on his youthful appearance. 65 looks good on you, Dad, Kevin added, raising his glass. Here's to another 20 years at least. Dessert was served, and the timing felt right. I'd waited patiently for neighborhood gossip, Kevin's children's triumphs, and Sophia's vacation plans. Nobody had asked a single inquiry concerning my life. Dad, Mom, everyone, I said, my heart hammering despite my seeming calm. I wanted to share some news about my company. My father nodded, immediately reaching for another slice of cake. Heartland Made was recently valued at $21 million. I told them. We've received several acquisition offers, and I was featured in Business Insider and Entrepreneur magazine last month. The stillness that followed seemed interminable. My mother froze, her fork halfway to her lips. Sophia shared a short, surprised look with Mateo. Kevin just stared. My father was the first to comment, and his tone was completely contemptuous. What exactly does that mean, Hammy? These internet businesses use all sorts of funny math to come up with these valuations. I kept my cool, describing in simple terms how business valuations worked, our revenue streams, and our growth. I highlighted our office, 37 workers, and connections with more than 400 American manufacturers. Kevin cut me off before I finished. So, you got lucky with this online thing. That's great, but some of us have been building real careers with actual qualifications. He stressed qualifications, and his wife nodded in agreement. It's not luck, I said, my tone calm but forceful. It's 7 years of working 18-hour days, solving complex problems, building something meaningful. We've helped save dozens of American manufacturing businesses that were on the verge of closing. My mother eventually spoke, her tone uncertain. That sounds impressive, dear, though I still wish you had finished your degree. Even in this business, education is important. My patience was growing thin, but I pressed on. Actually, I brought something for Dad. I handed him an envelope holding the papers for the retirement account I had funded. I wanted to make sure you both had a comfortable retirement. My father opened it. Instead of appreciation, his cheeks heated with something. His expression darkening, resembling rage. What is this supposed to be? Some kind of charity? He dropped the papers on the table. We didn't raise you to throw money around like you're better than everyone. That is not my intention at all, I stated. I just wanted to help. The same way I helped with Mom's medical bills, Kevin's house down payment, and Sophia's wedding. 3 heads raised at the same time. You? My father asked, his voice rising. That was all you? Sophia felt humiliated. Kevin's visage hardened into something unpleasant. My mother only looked puzzled. You've been secretly paying for things behind our backs? Playing the big shot with your internet money? She asked. I was just trying to help, I said, my voice lower than I intended. I never wanted recognition. I just wanted to support the family. Support? Kevin asked, scoffing. By making us feel like charity cases. Some of us work honest jobs with actual degrees, not getting rich quick with online schemes. It's not a scheme, I maintained, feeling the debate get out of hand. I built a legitimate business that helps American manufacturers. We employ dozens of people with good salaries and benefits. My father stood up, letting his napkin fall to the floor. You drop out of college against our advice, disappear into your little internet world, and now you come back throwing money around like you have all the answers. That's not what I'm doing, I argued, trying to keep my voice calm. You think your money makes you successful? He asked, his voice rising even higher. You are still just uneducated trash who got lucky. Anyone can get lucky. The room went silent. My mother gasped slightly, but she said nothing in my defense. Kevin stared down at his plate, a sickening smile playing on the corner of his lips. Sophia seemed caught between embarrassment and agreement. Henrik, my mother finally said, too late and quietly to matter. No, my father insisted, now completely agitated. I have worked my entire life the right way. I got an education, built a respectable career, raised a family. I will not be shown up in my own home by my dropout daughter. I arose slowly, collecting my handbag. I should go. Yes, you should, my father retorted. Get out of my house, you little lowlife. Your money does not make you part of this family. We have standards. The words landed like physical blows. I examined each face around the table, looking for any ally or hint of support. There was none. Happy birthday, Dad, I replied quietly, heading to the door with all the dignity I could summon. Nobody followed me out. Nobody called after me. I got into my car, my hands shaking so much that I could scarcely grip the steering wheel. As I drove away from the house where I grew up, I realized something fundamental had broken, something that seemed beyond repair. My trip back to the hotel was a jumble of lamps and tears. I had to pull over twice because I was so overwhelmed. The horrible irony was not lost on me. I had a multimillion-dollar firm, but I was spending the night in a motel in my hometown because my family's home was no longer accessible to me. In the sterile silence of my hotel room, I repeated every statement and reply. Had I been overly proud? Had I misjudged our relationship all these years? The financial assistance now disclosed felt like a ridiculous attempt to buy acceptance that I could never obtain via my own achievements. I took out my laptop and began documenting every penny I had given my family. The list was extensive. $75,200 for Mom's cancer treatment, $122,000 for Kevin's home, and $55,000 for Sophia's wedding. Not to mention Dad's car repair, Mom's kitchen remodel, and countless presents and emergencies. All handled discreetly via accounts designed to conceal their origin. A total of over $310,000, minus the retirement account he had recently rejected. Money given freely out of love to a family who had just labeled me as garbage. My phone lit up around midnight with a text from Sophia. Dad is still upset, but he will overcome it. You know how he reacts when his authority is challenged. There was no apology or acknowledgement of the awful things stated, just the assumption that I would accept the abuse and return to the family dynamic as if nothing had occurred. I did not respond. The following morning, I contacted a therapist. Family wounds cut deepest, Dr. Richardson noted, especially when they target the very things we've worked the hardest to overcome. Over the following few days, she assisted me in understanding how my success undermined their hierarchy and values. My financial support, rather than earning gratitude, had sparked animosity by emphasizing a change in power that they were unable to accept. Your father's identity is built around being the provider and authority, she told me. Your success challenges both roles. I began journaling, chronicling trends from childhood. Subtle ways my entrepreneurial drive had been discouraged, how academic triumphs were recognized while commercial successes were downplayed, and the continual reminder that without a degree, I'd never really flourish. This method indicated how thoroughly I had assimilated the messages. Despite my outward success, a part of me still felt like the family failure, the dropout with something to prove. That explains my reticence to openly publicize my accomplishments and my ongoing financial support without recognition. A week after the awful supper, my sister called. I let it go to voicemail. Haim, please call back. Dad feels horrible, but you must realize how it appeared. You come in and basically show off your money. It was inconsiderate to those of us who had worked hard for our careers. I deleted the message. The plot twist was stunning. I had somehow become the villain for just stating the facts about my business after years of downplaying my accomplishment. My brother texted the following: Family is family. Let's go past this. Again, no apology, just the expectation that I would accept my assigned role and the treatment that accompanied it. 2 weeks after the dinner, I made a choice that felt both terrifying and freeing. I would choose self-respect above destructive familial relationships. My new home would be the beach house I had purchased as an investment property in Naples, Florida the previous year. Before leaving, I sent a letter to my parents. Not an angry tirade, but a genuine confession of hurt and disappointment. Dear Mother and Father, I've spent years seeking your acceptance and respect. To avoid making anyone uncomfortable, I have provided financial assistance for our family while downplaying my achievement. Despite creating a $21 million firm that helps to maintain American manufacturing jobs, I've been made to feel like the family failure because I took a different path than you did. When Dad referred to me as illiterate trash and a lowlife, it exposed how you truly perceive me. No amount of accomplishment can ever alter that perception. I cannot continue to be involved in a relationship in which my worth is determined by credentials rather than character and achievement. I will always love you both, but I need to separate for my own well-being. I hope that eventually we can repair our friendship on the basis of mutual respect. Love, Haim. I sealed the letter and mailed it personally. No response came. My executive assistant assisted me in arranging for the packing and shipping of my items in Ohio. Most of my furnishings and stuff I told her to donate. I desired a fresh start with minimum baggage, both literal and figurative. My company might be operated remotely. I had developed a solid leadership team that could handle day-to-day operations. As I boarded the plane to Florida, I had a strange mix of loss and freedom. The family I had worked so hard to please was behind me, but so was the pressure of seeking approval I would never receive. Naples, Florida, welcomed me with warm sunshine and salt-scented air, a dramatic contrast to the gray Ohio winter I had just left behind. My beach house was a modern two-story structure with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Gulf of Mexico. Standing on a secluded stretch of shoreline, it felt impersonal, similar to an upscale hotel. Making my house genuinely mine was a type of therapy. I replaced the generic beige bedding with homemade quilts by one of my Heartland-made craftsmen. Mass-produced art was replaced with original pieces by emerging American artists I met through the business. Each morning, I awoke to the sound of waves and the sight of true creativity all around me. The kitchen was transformed next with open shelving to display handcrafted pottery and bright handwoven linens to warm the space. Routines became crucial. Each morning began with a sunrise walk down the beach, gathering shells and watching dolphins soar through the surf. I discovered a neighborhood coffee shop and became a regular, greeted by name. Running the business remotely was easier than expected. Video conferencing replaced in-person meetings and our systems ran efficiently without the daily drive or office distractions. I was more productive and made clearer judgments from my new quiet headquarters. After the first month, my executive team paid me a visit, and several of them noted how much my leadership style had improved. "You seem more centered," Julian, my operations director, commented. "More confident in your decisions." He was correct. Without the pressure to seek family approval, my business instincts flowed more readily. I trusted my own judgment without the specter of my father's condemnation hovering over each decision. Community involvement became another anchor. I joined both a local chamber of commerce and a businesswomen's networking organization. Unlike in Ohio, where I downplayed my success, here I was forthright about my company and accomplishments. Respect came naturally, free of the baggage of who I was prior to my achievement. I befriended Margot, an art gallery owner who introduced me to her group of acquaintances, brilliant women in their 30s and 40s who respected each other based on current accomplishments rather than previous qualifications. Our weekly dinner gatherings were filled with laughter and talks that never featured inquiries about my schooling or claims that I'd simply been lucky. Then came an unexpected visit. 3 weeks into my Florida residency, my brother Kevin showed up unexpectedly at my door one Saturday afternoon. "Nice place," he commented, whistling as he took in the seaside vista. "Really nice." His arrival was unsettling in my new refuge. He seemed out of place in his button-down shirt and pressed khakis against my casual coastal decor. "What brings you to Florida, Kevin?" I said, not offering a drink or a seat. "Family?" he asked, flashing the same confident smile that had charmed our parents since we were little. "And I could use some advice about an investment opportunity, possibly a loan, to get in on the ground floor." Some patterns were too predictable to be unexpected. Without my parents to watch, his illusion swiftly dissipated. This was strictly a financial visit. "I'm not making any loans to family members anymore," I stated firmly. "That chapter is over." His visage darkened. "So that's how it is. You move to your beach mansion and forget where you came from. Dad was right about you." Dad called me uneducated trash and kicked me out of his house. I told him. Is that what you came here to reinforce? Kevin retreated fast. He didn't mean it like that. You know how he gets. Family fights happen. That was not a fight, I responded. It was a revelation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have plans this afternoon. After showing him around, I sat on my terrace watching the surf, oddly unshaken by the experience. The boundaries I was establishing felt proper, even though they were difficult to implement. That evening, I made an important decision. I called my lawyer and set up an anonymous scholarship fund at the community college I had briefly attended. The Haim Morrow Entrepreneurship Scholarship would offer complete tuition and mentorship to 5 students each year who displayed entrepreneurial potential but lacked standard academic advantages. Make sure the selection criteria focus on demonstrated initiative and creative problem-solving, not grades, I told him. And find mentors who have built actual businesses, not just taught business classes. As the weeks passed, my place genuinely felt like home. I created a garden of native Florida plants that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds. I got Otto, a mixed-breed rescue dog who joined me on beach walks and slept at the foot of my bed. His simple affection was a constant reminder of how relationships should feel. I experienced unexpected calm and solitude. Free of the continuous looming fear of family criticism, I uncovered aspects of myself that had been overshadowed by stress. I took a pottery class and was lousy at it, but enjoyed the meditative process. I attempted paddleboard yoga, spending more time in the water than on the board, but laughing through each try. 3 weeks became a month and then 6 weeks. The anguish of familial rejection persisted, but it became less sharp, more like an old hurt that occasionally ached than a new wound. I was creating something fresh here, not simply a home, but an authentic existence based on my ideals rather than someone else's expectations. Then came an unforeseen revelation that would bring my family's narrative full circle in ways I never imagined. The Naples Business Journal was not a publication I usually read, but Margot texted me early one morning and insisted I get a copy. Page 3. You're going to want to see this. There I was pictured on my deck with the Gulf of Mexico behind me, with the headline, E-commerce innovator brings multi-million-dollar business to Naples. The writer had done her research, outlining Heartland Mate's rise from startup to $21 million valuation, our effect on American manufacturing, and my recent entrepreneurial scholarship foundation. The story presented a considerably more thorough image of achievement than anything I had seen in my hometown media. I didn't authorize this, I informed Margot when she called to congratulate me. Public records, she clarified. Property transfers, business registrations. Once they knew you were here, the rest was easy to piece together. Besides, it's a great article. She was correct. The post was well-researched and flattering, emphasizing business accomplishments. I didn't think much about it until the next week when my phone began to light up with social media notifications. The piece was taken up by numerous larger business publications and then widely shared on LinkedIn and Facebook. Former high school classmates immediately recalled our bond. Teachers claimed they had always recognized my potential. The most startling letters came from small business owners in my hometown, congratulating me for demonstrating what was possible without pursuing established channels. You motivated me to eventually start my business, one former classmate wrote. If you can develop something that's substantial without a fancy degree, then perhaps my proposal has validity as well. The local newspaper in my city even carried a condensed version of the article with an additional angle. Local entrepreneur has national influence. The irony was not lost on me. The same community that had discreetly reinforced my parents' disappointment suddenly recognized me as a hometown success story. My family eventually discovered the full depth of my accomplishment as a result of the media's ripple effect. The first hint was a friend request from my cousin Greta, followed by several additional extended family members who had previously expressed little interest in my life. Then my mother texted me, "I saw the article about your company. Very impressive, my dear. Dad and I are quite proud." No mention of his unkind words, no acknowledgement of the schism, just a casual claim of pride that had been noticeably absent while I sat at their dinner table. My father's voicemail arrived the following day. his tone deceptively cheerful. "Hi, Haim. Big news about your company in the paper. Always knew you had it in you. There seems to have been a misunderstanding last time we spoke. Call me back when you can." A misunderstanding. That was how he described calling his daughter illiterate trash and kicking her out of the house. 3 days later, my mother texted again. "We are thinking of visiting Florida next month. I would love to see your new place. Let us know if that works for you." The message struck like a stone in my gut. 6 weeks of mending, of creating a new life free of their judgment. And now they wanted to simply show up at my door as if nothing had occurred. I did not answer promptly. Instead, I arranged an emergency appointment with Dr. Richardson. "You have several options," she recommended. "You can decline the visit entirely. You can agree but set strict boundaries, or you can see this as an opportunity for honest conversation that might lead to healing, though that requires their willingness to acknowledge the harm done." After careful thinking, I wrote my mother, "You and Dad are welcome to visit, but we need to have an open discussion about what happened at his birthday dinner before we can proceed. Please let me know whether you're open to that kind of conversation." Her response was quick. "Of course, dear. We just want to get this behind us and be a family again." That language bothered me, the desire to put this behind us without confronting it squarely. But I did confirm dates for their visit the following month. As the day neared, I prepared physically and emotionally. I arranged for them to stay at a neighboring hotel so that I could maintain my privacy. I role-played unpleasant conversations with Dr. Richardson to practice setting limits without becoming defensive. My folks arrived on a lovely Tuesday afternoon. I met them for lunch at a seaside restaurant, which provided a public atmosphere to help temper the initial meeting. They appeared smaller, less threatening than they did in Ohio. My father's confident demeanor seemed lessened and my mother appeared more nervous than I remembered. Despite the coastal environment, they both dressed formally. My father in a button-down shirt and pants and my mother in a structured dress more appropriate for church than beach eating. "This place is something else," my father observed, pointing to the turquoise lake visible through the restaurant windows. "You have done well for yourself, Hamie." The tiny emphasis on yourself did not miss me, as did the hint that my accomplishment existed outside of family values. "Thank you," I said simply, not breaking the tense silence that ensued. My mother joined in with small conversation about their flight, the weather, and how different Florida was from Ohio. I responded respectfully but didn't contribute to the conversation. Finally, once our meal arrived, my father cleared his throat. "About what happened at my birthday dinner. You called me uneducated trash and a lowlife," I said gently, keeping eye contact. "You told me to get out of your house and that my money did not make me part of the family." His cheeks reddened. "I was surprised by the news about your business. I may have overreacted. This is not an apology but an excuse," I added. "I need to understand. Was that reaction about me sharing my success? Or about learning I had been helping the family financially?" "Both," my mother interrupted. "It felt like you were showing off. Like you were saying you're better than us now." "I never said or thought that," I explained. "I spent years hiding my success to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. I helped financially because I could, and I wanted to support the family I love." My dad shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the way you presented it was very forward, and finding out you were behind those other things. It felt like charity we never asked for." The talk remained in this vein throughout lunch. There was no genuine apology, only explanations and attempts to diminish the gravity of the situation. The subtext became more evident. They were here because my public achievement made rejecting me socially awkward, not because they had changed their minds about my worth. As we finished our lunch, I came to a decision. "I'd like to show you my home, but first I need to be very clear about something. I will not pretend the dinner never happened. I will not accept being called names or having my choices denigrated. If you want a relationship moving forward, it has to be based on mutual respect." They exchanged eyes, and my father nodded stiffly. "That seems reasonable." When they arrived at my beach property later that afternoon, their looks as they took in the magnificent ocean vista said it all. This tangible evidence of my progress could not be dismissed or minimized. The $21 million worth was no longer an abstract figure, but rather reflected in coastal real estate and elegance. "This is quite something," my father said, his voice tense. "Would you like a tour?" I suggested, as I guided them through the house, pointing out the handcrafted artifacts from Heartland-made craftsmen that adorned each room. I realized something significant. Their acceptance, which I had desired for so long, no longer carried the same weight. I was proud of this home and the company that helped make it possible. Regardless of how they reacted, this revelation was likely the most beneficial outcome of their visit, worth more than any apology they could have provided. The conversation that ensued on the terrace facing the ocean, as the setting sun painted the sky in orange and pink, was challenging but important. "I want to be clear about something," my father said, his tone more conciliatory than I'd ever heard. "I am sorry for what I said at my birthday. It was uncalled for, regardless of how surprised I was. While the apology was appreciated, it was tempered by a qualification that reduced its significance." His attention remained on his amazement rather than the damage his comments had caused. "What hurt most," I said softly, "was that those words seemed to reveal how you truly see me despite everything I have accomplished." My mother reached across the table without quite touching my hand. "We have always been proud of you, Hamie. We just worried about your future without a degree." "My future is here," I declared, pointing to the property and the business that had made it possible. "I built it without a degree, but with 7 years of working harder than most people ever will. That deserves respect, not condescension." My dad shifted uncomfortably. "The business world can be fickle. Companies rise and fall overnight. We just wanted security for you. I understand that concern comes from love," I told him. "But there is no perfect security in any path. Plenty of people with degrees struggle financially, while others without formal education thrive. What matters is recognizing there are multiple valid paths to success." The chat lasted for hours as the sun fell and the stars appeared over the gulf. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no sobbing group hug that somehow repaired decades of misunderstanding. Instead, we struck a shaky agreement, a beginning point rather than a conclusion. "Moving forward," I said as the party ended, "I am open to rebuilding our relationship, but with clear boundaries. I will not accept being demeaned for my educational choices or having my success attributed to luck rather than hard work and skill." My parents consented, though I could see my father's reluctance in his tight smile. My mother appeared more open, perhaps realizing for the first time the part she had played in permitting the family dynamics that had caused so much misery. After they returned to Ohio, I reflected on my visit and the road that had brought me here. The mending process was far from complete, but great progress had been made. In the months that followed, I only spoke with my parents once a week, which grew less awkward over time. My relationship with my siblings developed differently. Sophia eventually made a real apology for her role, and we gradually restored an adult friendship. Kevin remained distant, occasionally sending Christmas wishes but making no genuine attempt to comprehend or acknowledge the pain done. My personal recovery path has continued with frequent therapy. Dr. Richardson assisted me in seeing how familial trauma had influenced my approach to business and relationships, instilling habits of seeking validation through performance and financial generosity. "Success is not a substitute for self-worth," she informed me, "and family approval cannot be purchased, no matter how much you give." This realization prompted me to set firmer limits in all interactions. I learned to feel more comfortable talking about my successes without downplaying them. I learned to contribute out of true charity rather than in an attempt to get acceptance. The Entrepreneurship Foundation became the focal point of my philanthropic efforts. Aside from supporting scholarships, I created a mentorship program that connects successful businesses without traditional credentials with talented students experiencing similar obstacles. Witnessing their development and achievement provided a deeper sense of happiness than any family approval could. My friend circle in Naples grew, forming a chosen family built on mutual respect and true connection. Our weekly reunions provided a sense of joy and belonging that I had never had in Ohio. These interactions, which I deliberately picked and maintained, showed me what it feels like to have healthy support. The beach house evolved totally over time, with each room representing my unique style and values. The garden flourished. Otto, my rescue dog, found a buddy when I acquired Freya, a senior retriever who everyone else had disregarded. Running Heartland made remotely was so effective that I extended flexible work policies to all employees. Productivity rose and employee satisfaction reached all-time highs. 1 year after moving to Florida, I organized a dinner party for my new friends. As we sat around the table on my deck, watching dolphins frolic in the sunset waves, I thought how much my life had changed. From that awful night at my parents' place to this chosen family. Margot lifted a glass to having the courage to prioritize respect over obligation. She sang a toast. The sentiment expressed exactly what I had learned on this adventure. Family relationships are important, but not at the expense of dignity and self-esteem. Success cannot be evaluated merely by degrees or traditional accomplishments, but rather by the lives we touch and the good impact we have. Most significantly, I learned that forgiving does not imply forgetting or continuing to tolerate abusive treatment. True forgiveness is an emotional process that involves releasing anger and resentment while keeping healthy boundaries. My tale, like everyone's, is still unfolding. My connection with my parents is constantly changing, sometimes improving and sometimes reverting to old patterns. I maintain my boundaries with compassionate firmness, acknowledging that total comprehension may never be possible but refusing to compromise my self-worth in the pursuit of it. If my experience has taught me anything, it's that your worth is not defined by other people's impressions, especially those clouded by obsolete beliefs and expectations. Success manifests itself in a variety of ways, often unexpectedly, and the most painful rejections can lead to the most true and gratifying future roots. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My mom criticized me as a stupid child at Christmas. So, I told her how much I had been financially supporting the family. The room went dead silent. I always thought Christmas would be the moment I could finally share the good news that would make my family proud. The engagement to the love of my life and the promotion I had worked so hard for. But instead, that night shattered everything between us. In all honesty, it was probably the nicest thing that ever happened to me. To really comprehend it, you must first grasp what it was like to grow up. I was always the middle child in my family, which meant that I was almost invisible. My older brother, Lucas, was the golden boy. My mother, Catherine, thought he could do no wrong. He's now a doctor, and she never lets people forget. Then there was Sophia, my younger sister, the darling baby, the tiny princess who got away with everything and eventually became a great lawyer. And I, Emma, was stuck in the midst, constantly scurrying, desperate to earn even a portion of the attention and love they appeared to receive so easily. From the time I was old enough to understand our family dynamics, I understood I needed to work twice as hard for half the acknowledgement. Lucas could bring home B's and be complimented, whereas I had to maintain straight A's simply to get a mere nod of attention. Sophia threw tantrums and broke things, which was cute. She was simply expressing herself. However, if I even raised my voice, I was being rude and needed an attitude correction. I recall spending numerous hours in high school working part-time at the neighborhood grocery shop and tutoring younger students. Not because we needed the money, but because I genuinely believed that if I could contribute monetarily, my parents would finally recognize my importance. I saved every penny to buy flowers for my mother on Mother's Day, jewelry for her birthday, and thoughtful Christmas gifts that I spent weeks selecting. Lucas and Sophia would get something last minute from the mall, and their gifts usually resulted in the largest smiles and the longest hugs. College was meant to be my new beginning, my opportunity to show myself in an area I was enthusiastic about. I selected marketing because I enjoyed the creativity, strategy, and ability to present a story that resonated with people. But when I told my family about my major, my mother's face sank. It was as if I had just stated that I was dropping out completely. Marketing, she remarked, her voice full of displeasure. That's not a real career, Emma. That's just playing with pretty pictures and slogans. Why can't you be more like Lucas and choose something that actually helps people, or like Sophia, something that requires real intelligence and makes a difference in the world? Those statements stung more than I admitted at the time. But I persevered, graduated with honors, and found my first job at a tiny marketing agency downtown. I worked my way up gradually, taking on extra projects, working late, coming in early, and proving myself time and again. Every modest accomplishment, every client I acquired, every successful campaign, I'd call home, bursting with pride to deliver the news. The chats always concluded in the same manner. "That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Lucas just got published in another medical journal? Or Sophia just won another case? She's really making a name for herself." For years, I continued trying. I sent cards on holidays, called every week, and remembered birthdays and anniversaries. When I was 28, my parents moved into their new house, and I spent the whole vacation painting walls and arranging boxes. My siblings were too busy with their vital occupations to help. I dog-sat their German shepherd any time they left town. Even if I'm allergic, I'd spend the entire weekend sneezing and taking antihistamines. When my father, Edward, underwent emergency gallbladder surgery this spring, I took time off work to transport him to appointments and sat with my mother in the waiting room for 5 hours. Lucas was in surgery that day while Sophia was in court. But I was the one who got admonished later about how I should have phoned them both more regularly for updates. The worst aspect wasn't even the absence of recognition. It was a constant comparison. Every talk eventually came back to how much more prosperous, gorgeous, and accomplished my siblings were. Family dinners were endurance tests as I sat there listening to constant agitation for accomplishments that, while not much more amazing than my own, were regarded as Nobel Prize winners because they came from the golden children. But this past fall, things in my life began to fall into place. James and I had been dating for 3 years before he proposed on a weekend vacation to the mountains in October. The ring was simple and wonderful. More significantly, he saw me in a way that my family never did. He praised my accomplishments at work, encouraged my creative pursuits, and never made me feel as if I had to compete for his attention or favor. Around the same time, my employer promoted me to senior marketing coordinator. It included a large income rise and the opportunity to run my own staff. It was everything I had worked for. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly proud. I couldn't wait to deliver both pieces of news with my family for Christmas, hoping that this time would be different. Christmas morning began as it always did at my childhood home on Maple Street. The house was adorned exactly the same way it had been for the previous 18 years. White lights on the evergreen tree, crimson and gold ornaments acquired by my mother, and the same angel topper since I was 5. The smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee permeated the air. Christmas music played quietly. I arrived about 9 a.m., arms full of freshly wrapped gifts and a heart full of apprehensive joy. James was visiting his family in Portland, but we had planned a celebration when he returned. I'd been carrying my engagement ring in my purse for 4 months, hoping to announce it in person. My father met me at the door with one of his loving bear hugs. Edward had always been the more emotionally available father, the one who remembered to inquire about my employment and listened. "There's my marketing genius," he added, accepting the gifts. "How's the new position treating you?" I blushed. "Actually, Dad, I have some really exciting news to share with everyone." "Oh yeah? Can't wait to hear it, sweetheart." My mother arrived in the doorway wearing the red cashmere sweater I had purchased her for her birthday last year. She looked me up and down with that familiar gaze, as if she had already found fault before I even said hi. "Emma, what on earth are you wearing? That green dress makes you look washed out. Didn't I tell you that color doesn't suit your complexion? And your hair looks like you just rolled out of bed." "Merry Christmas, Mom." I forced a smile. "I actually spent an hour on my hair this morning." "Well, you should have spent 2, she said, going to the kitchen. "Sophia looks absolutely stunning in her new navy suit. You should ask her where she shops." My sister Sophia was already in the living room looking stunning in a fitted navy dress that likely cost more than my monthly rent. She worked for a top law firm and dressed accordingly. Lucas sat on the couch wearing his fancy watch and fashionable sweater, going through his phone, looking for messages from the hospital. "Look who finally decided to show up," Sophia said, smirking. "We've been waiting to start presents." "I'm literally 6 minutes late because I stopped to get gas," I said, but no one seemed to listen. The gift exchange went precisely as I imagined. Lucas gave everyone gift cards that he had definitely purchased at the last minute, but they were pricey from high-end businesses. So, Mom gushed about how kind and generous he is. Sophia had purchased our parents a weekend holiday to a posh spa resort, earning her 20 minutes of applause and enthusiastic planning chats. I'd spent weeks selecting personalized gifts for everyone. A vintage medical textbook related to Lucas's specialty, a beautiful leather briefcase with Sophia's initials engraved, and a custom photo album for my parents filled with family photos from the previous decade that I digitized and printed myself. "Oh, how nice," my mother commented, swiftly turning through the album. "This must have taken you some time." "I spent about 50 hours on it," I claimed. "I had to scan all the old photos and restore some damaged ones, then design the layouts." "That's sweet, dear. Lucas, show everyone that new watch your colleague gave you." And with that, the topic moved on. My father squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "This is lovely, Emma. Thank you." But the moment was already past. As the morning evolved into afternoon, additional family members arrived, including Aunt Clara, Uncle Frank, cousins Lily and Edward Jr., and my grandmother Margaret. The home was full with laughing and discussion, and I found myself drawn to the kitchen, assisting my mother with dinner preparations, as I had always done. "The turkey needs to come out in 20 minutes, she said, her gaze fixed on the potatoes she was mashing. "And someone needs to set the table." "Where's Sophia?" "She's in the living room talking to Grandma Margaret." "Well, she shouldn't have to worry about kitchen work. She works so hard during the week." I bit my tongue. I worked just as hard during the week, yet it never appeared to affect these computations. As dinner time neared, my anxieties grew. I had intended to make my revelation during dessert when everyone would be relaxed and in high spirits. I kept caressing the ring box in my purse, reminding myself that this was excellent, happy news that should unite families. But when I saw my mother's face light up whenever Lucas recounted his latest case or Sophia mentioned her recent court victory, I began to wonder whether I was setting myself up for disappointment yet again. Dinner was served at 3 p.m. sharp, exactly like every Christmas since I can remember. The dining room table was set with my mother's finest china, the same pattern she had used for special occasions since I was a child. Grandma Margaret sat at one end, my father at the other, and the rest of us filled in the gaps, following an unspoken order that always placed me between my youngest cousin and the vacant chair where my grandfather used to sit. The talk revolved smoothly around themes I'd heard 100 times before. Lucas's new medical practice developing, Sophia's recent elevation to junior partner, and my cousin Lily's wedding plans. I contributed when asked, laughed at my Uncle Frank's awful jokes, and complimented my Aunt Clara's new hairdo, all while waiting for the appropriate time to reveal my own news. "So, Emma," my grandma asked during a pause in our chat, "are you still working at that little advertising company downtown?" "Marketing company, Grandma. And yes, I am. Actually, I have some exciting news about that." Before I could finish, my mother jumped in. "Emma thinks making pretty pictures for businesses is the same as having a real career. I keep telling her she should go back to school for something more substantial, like nursing or teaching." "Marketing is a real career, Mom," I answered, attempting to maintain my voice level. "It's actually a field that requires a lot of strategy and analysis. I just got promoted to senior coordinator, which means I'll be leading my own team." "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," my Aunt Clara responded pleasantly. "Congratulations." "Thank you. Actually, I have even bigger news than that." I dug inside my purse and brought out the small velvet box, my heart thumping so loudly that I was sure everyone could hear it. This was it, the moment I had been planning for weeks. "James proposed," I said, opening the box and revealing the stunning solitaire ring. "We're engaged." The reaction was not what I had hoped for. After a brief moment of silence, the majority of the table offered polite congratulations. My father's expression softened into a real smile, and my grandmother reached out to squeeze my hand, but my mother's expression was unaltered, almost bored. Sophia inquired, "When did this happen?" "In October. We went to the mountains for a weekend, and he proposed during a hike to this beautiful overlook. It was perfect." "Okay," my mother said, her voice harsh. You've been engaged for 4 months, and you're just telling us now? I wanted to tell you in person as a family. Well, that's just typical of you, Emma. Always so secretive, always keeping things to yourself. No wonder we never know what's going on in your life. I sensed the usual sting of judgment masquerading as care. I'm not secretive, Mom. I call every week. I just wanted this to be special. Lucas inquired, what does James do again? Despite the fact that I had told him at least 3 times. He's a high school English teacher. A teacher? My mother repeated, disappointed. Well, I suppose that's stable employment at least. The way she phrased it made it obvious what she was thinking. Not outstanding, not successful, and not good enough for her kid. Never mind that James was kind, bright, and hilarious, and treated me as if I were the most important person in his life. He's a wonderful man, my grandmother declared firmly. When do we get to meet him properly? Soon, I hope. He's with his family in Portland for Christmas, but we're planning to have dinner with everyone next month. I hope he knows what he's getting into, Sophia replied, laughing softly. Emma's always been the difficult one in the family. I'm not difficult, I insisted, but my mother had already nodded in agreement. Emma has always been challenging, she added, as if I weren't right there. She's never quite figured out how to make things easy on herself or anyone else. The words struck me like a physical blow, but I attempted to shake them off. This was intended to be a celebration, a pleasant occasion. I could not let them spoil it. Well, I think it's wonderful news, my father exclaimed, raising his glass of wine. To Emma and James, may you be very happy together. A few individuals raised their glasses half-heartedly, but the atmosphere was forced and unpleasant. The talk swiftly shifted to other things, and I found myself sitting there with the ring box still in my hands, feeling smaller and more insignificant than before. As dinner was being served, my mother began into a comprehensive explanation of Lucas' most recent professional accomplishments. He'd been highlighted in a medical journal, invited to present at a conference in Chicago, and was being interviewed for a position at the university hospital. Each accomplishment was discussed in great detail, with my mother's delight nearly radiating across the table. And Sophia, she said without pausing, just won the biggest case of her career. The settlement was in the 6 figures, and the senior partners are talking about fast-tracking her to full partner. That's amazing, I said, truly meaning it. Congratulations, Sophia. Thanks, she murmured. But her focus had already returned to her phone. I sat there listening to my siblings' praise, waiting for someone to bring up my engagement or promotion, but it never happened. It was as if I had never spoken, as if my news did not deserve more than a few seconds of attention. My mother looked directly at me and delivered the words that would permanently change our relationship. You know, Emma, I've been thinking about this engagement of yours, and I have to be honest. I'm worried about James. I mean, what kind of man proposes to you? The table became quiet. My cousins looked up from their phones. What do you mean? I inquired, fearing I already knew. Well, let's be realistic here. You're 32. You work in a job that barely pays the bills. You live in that tiny apartment, and you've never really accomplished anything significant. You're the most useless child we have. I just hope James realizes what he's signing up for before it's too late. The hush that ensued was deafening. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting to see how I would respond. My Aunt Clara appeared horrified. My father was shaking his head in astonishment. Even Lucas and Sophia appeared stunned by the brutality of the comment. But for the first time in my life, instead of shrinking back and accepting it, making excuses, or attempting to laugh it off, I felt something else rise up inside me. Yes, it was angry, but it was also clear. It was 32 years of hidden frustration and hurt that finally came out. I rose up slowly, my hands trembling from emotion, and looked my mother in the eyes. Then I added, "Stop calling me when you need money." With a calm and clear voice, her face fell. The stillness that followed my statements was so complete that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway and the faint sound of Christmas music playing in the living room. My mother's expression shifted from arrogant superiority to something I'd never seen before. Genuine amazement mingled with panic. "What are you talking about?" she said, but her tone had lost all authority. "I'm talking about the $1,600 I've been sending you every month for the past 3 years to cover your car payments because Dad's business was struggling. I told you. I'm talking about the $3,000 I gave you last spring when he needed surgery and your insurance wouldn't cover all the costs. I'm talking about the $2,000 I sent to help pay for Sophia's bar exam fees because she'd already spent her trust fund on that trip to Europe." I dug into my purse and took out my phone, launching my banking app with remarkably steady fingers, despite the adrenaline rushing through my veins. "Want to see the receipts?" I asked, holding up the screen. "I have them all right here. Every transfer, every check, every emergency loan that somehow never got paid back." My Aunt Clara stared at me, her mouth slightly wide. My Uncle Frank had set down his fork and listened closely. My grandmother nodded slowly as if the parts of a puzzle were finally coming together. "Emma," my father began, but I hadn't finished. "Remember last Christmas when Lucas's student loans went into default because his new practice wasn't bringing in enough money yet? Who do you think paid those off? It wasn't Mom and Dad because they were still recovering from Dad's medical bills. It was me, for $1,000 that I'd been saving for a down payment on a house." Lucas's face had turned pale. "Emma, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know, because Mom made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would embarrass you and that I should just consider it my contribution to the family." "My contribution?" I returned my gaze to my mother, who was opening and closing her mouth as if she were searching for words that would not come. "You want to know what kind of man proposes to someone like me? The kind who sees that I've been single-handedly keeping this family financially afloat while working my supposedly meaningless job and living in my supposedly pathetic apartment. The kind who recognizes that maybe, just maybe, I've been sacrificing my own financial security and dreams to take care of everyone else." "I never asked you to," my mother said faintly. "You absolutely did ask. You called me crying about the car payments. You called me panicking about Dad's surgery. You called me begging for help with Sophia's fees. And every single time I helped because that's what families do. But apparently that's what the useless child does while the successful ones get all the credit and none of the responsibility." Sophia finally spoke up in a small voice. "I didn't know you paid for my bar exam. Because I wasn't supposed to tell you. Just like I wasn't supposed to tell anyone about the money I've been lending Mom and Dad or the payment I made on Lucas's loans or the countless other times I've bailed this family out of financial trouble." I reopened my banking app and started reading actual numbers and dates. September 15th, 2022, $1,600 to Catherine Walsh for car payment. October 3rd, $1,600 to Catherine Walsh for car payment. On November 7th, Edward Walsh received $2,000 for medical expenses. Catherine Walsh received $1,600 on December 19th for her auto payment. My father was staring at my mother with a look I hadn't seen before. "Catherine, is this true?" "It's not what it sounds like," she responded swiftly. "Emma was just helping out temporarily while we got back on our feet." "Temporarily?" I laughed, but it wasn't funny. "It's been 3 years, Mom. 3 years of monthly payments. 3 years of me prioritizing your financial stability over my own. 2 years of me living paycheck to paycheck while you drove around in a car I was paying for, complaining about how unsuccessful your useless daughter is." My grandmother leaned across the table to hold my hand. "Honey, why didn't you tell any of us about this?" "Because I thought if I could just help enough, if I could just prove my value to this family in some way, maybe I'd finally earn the love and respect that Lucas and Sophia seem to get for free. I thought if I could be useful, even if it was just financially, maybe Mom would stop looking at me like I was a disappointment." I had been holding back tears for years, and they were finally coming. However, they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of relief. Tears of finally uttering a truth I'd been holding in for so long. "You want to know what James sees in me?" I asked, my voice rising stronger. "He sees someone who's been working 2 jobs to support her family while they belittle her career. He sees someone who's been giving up her own dreams and financial goals to make sure everyone else in her family is okay. He sees someone who's been the real backbone of this family, while being treated like she's worthless. Lucas shook his head. Emma, I had no idea. If I'd known you were the one who paid off my loans, you'd what? You'd have treated me with basic respect? You'd have defended me when Mom made her snide comments? Because that's all I ever wanted. Not gratitude, not praise, just basic human decency. I glanced to Sophia, who was looking down at her plate. And you? Do you have any idea how many times I've covered for you? Not just financially, but in every other way. When you were too hungover to help Mom move, who do you think spent her weekend packing boxes? When you were too busy to visit Dad in the hospital, who do you think sat with him for hours? Emma, my dad said. I'm so sorry. I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. Because she made me promise not to tell you. She said it would hurt your pride and that you were the most financially stable one. It was my responsibility to help. Funny how I went from being the most useless to the most financially stable depending on what she needed from me. My mother found her voice again. You're being dramatic, Emma. Families help each other. That's what we do. No, Mom. What families do is support each other emotionally and treat each other with respect. What you do is take my money while telling everyone how worthless I am. What you do is use me as a financial safety net while treating me like an embarrassment. I got up and moved my chair away from the table. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out exactly how useless I really am because as of today, the Bank of Emma is permanently closed. My revelation sparked an instant and tumultuous response. As soon as I declared that I was no longer serving as the family's financial safety net, various conversations broke out around the table. My Aunt Clara demanded to know how long this was going on. My Uncle Frank was asking my father if he knew about the money. My grandmother looked at my mother with intense disappointment. Emma, wait, my mother murmured, standing up while I collected my bag and coat. Let's talk about this privately. Our family business. I returned my gaze to her. You mean the family business where you humiliate me in front of these same people every chance you get? The family business where you announce to everyone that I'm the most useless child you have? I think they're entitled to know the truth about how this family really operates. You're being vindictive, she said, her voice quivering. I'm being honest. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being completely honest about what's been happening in this family. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. My cousin Lily spoke from across the table. Emma, are you serious about the money? You've really been supporting them financially? Dead serious. I can show you bank statements going back years if you want proof. My father stared at my mother, confused and angry. Catherine, we need to talk right now. Not in front of everyone, she snapped. Why not? You had no problem discussing Emma's failures in front of everyone. You had no problem announcing to the entire table that she's useless. So why is it suddenly inappropriate to discuss the truth? Lucas eventually spoke up, his voice subdued. Emma, about my student loans. I genuinely didn't know. I thought Mom and Dad had helped me out. I understand you didn't know, I said, and I intended it. None of you knew because I was specifically told not to tell you. But Lucas, can I ask you something? In all the years we've been adults, have you ever once asked me if I needed help with anything? Have you ever inquired about my finances, my career struggles, my personal life beyond the bare minimum? He was silent for a long time. No, he eventually conceded. I guess I assumed you were doing fine. You assumed I was doing fine because it was easier than actually paying attention to my life. Just like it was easier for Sophia to assume someone else would handle the family emergencies and easier for Mom to assume I'd always be there to bail everyone out while she criticized everything about me. Sophia eventually looked up from her dish. I don't understand why you didn't just say no if you didn't want to help. Because I did want to help, I exclaimed. I wanted to help because I love this family despite everything. I wanted to help because I thought maybe if I proved my value in some tangible way, I'd finally be treated like I mattered. But I realize now that no amount of financial help can ever change how you guys perceive me. My grandma cleared her throat and the room became quiet. When Margaret Walsh talked, everyone listened. She had been the matriarch of our family for as long as I could remember, and her opinion was respected. "Catherine," she began, her voice severe in a way I'd rarely heard, "I am deeply disappointed in you. This young woman has been sacrificing her own financial security to help this family, and you've been treating her like she's worthless. That's not just ungrateful, it's cruel." "Mother, you don't understand the whole situation," my mother began. "I understand enough. I understand that Emma has been working 2 jobs to support herself and apparently half this family, while you've been telling everyone who'd listen that she's not good enough. I understand that she just announced her engagement, which should be one of the happiest moments of her life, and instead of celebrating with her, you used it as an opportunity to tear her down." The room was silent, save for my mother's fast breathing. I had never seen her mother call her out that directly before. "And another thing," my grandmother went on, "I've watched this girl grow up, and she's never been anything but kind, generous, and hardworking. If she's the most useless child you have, Catherine, then you have no idea how to measure a person's worth." My Aunt Clara nodded emphatically. "I have to agree with Mom. Emma, I had no idea you were dealing with all of this. I always wondered why you seemed so stressed during family gatherings." "I wasn't stressed," I replied gently. "I was exhausted. Emotionally, financially, physically exhausted from trying to be enough for a family that had already decided I never would be." My mother made one final attempt to regain control of the narrative. "Emma, you're making this sound much worse than it is. We're family. We help each other." "No, Mom. What families do is support each other emotionally and treat each other with respect. What you do is take my money while telling everyone how worthless I am. What you do is use me as a financial safety net while treating me like an embarrassment." I headed near the door but turned around once more. "My wedding is going to be beautiful. James and I are going to build a wonderful life together, and we're going to do it without the constant criticism and emotional manipulation that I've been accepting as normal for the past 32 years. Anyone who wants to be part of that life with respect and kindness is welcome. Anyone who doesn't can keep my phone number for emergencies, but don't expect me to answer." And with that, I walked out of my childhood home, leaving behind a table full of stunned faces and a mother who had finally known what it was like to be the one left speechless. The week after Christmas was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. My phone began ringing before I even arrived home that evening, and it didn't stop for days. But for the first time in my adult life, I didn't answer every call right away. I wasn't giving up everything to control other people's emotions or solve their problems. James had returned from Portland 2 days earlier when I called him crying from my car in my parents' driveway. He discovered me sitting on my couch around 11 p.m. that night, still dressed for Christmas, as I stared at my phone, which hummed with incoming calls and text messages. "I can't believe I actually did that," I kept saying. "I can't believe I finally said all of that out loud." "I can," he murmured, bringing me closer. "I've been waiting for you to stand up to them for 3 years. I just didn't want to push because I knew you had to get there on your own. But what if I was wrong? What if I was too harsh?" "Emma," he spoke softly, "you've been paying your mother's car payment for 3 years while she told people you were useless. There's no universe in which you were too harsh." The messages began pouring in that night and lasted for days. My father called first, his voice thick with what appeared to be genuine regret. "Emma, honey, I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. I'm so sorry. If I'd known." "Dad, it's not just about the money. It's about the way she's treated me my entire life. The money was just the final straw." "I know, sweetheart. I've been thinking a lot about that since you left. And you're right. I should have stood up for you more over the years. I should have said something when she made those comments." It was the first genuine apology I'd ever gotten from anyone in my family, and it meant more than I could say. Lucas called the following day. "Emma, I feel terrible about the loan situation. I want to pay you back." "It's not about paying me back, Lucas. It's about the fact that for all these years, you've been perfectly happy to assume that someone else would handle family problems while you focused on your career. You never once asked if I needed help or support." "You're right," he replied gently. I guess I always saw you as the strong one, the one who had everything figured out. I was the one who couldn't say no. There's a difference. Sophia waited 3 days to call and she was guarded. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this, Emma. Families help each other out. It's not like anyone forced you to give us money. Sophia, do you remember what you said to me at dinner? You said I was the difficult one in the family. Do you have any idea how that felt coming right after Mom called me useless? I was just joking around. It wasn't a joke to me. It never is. Do you realize that between you and Lucas, I can't remember the last time either of you said something genuinely kind about me? The last time you supported me or celebrated something good happening in my life. She was silent for a long time. I guess I never thought about it that way. That's the problem. None of you think about it. You take my support for granted while treating me like I'm the burden. My mother, understandably, was the most insistent. She made 6 calls on December 28th alone, leaving more frantic voicemails. Emma, this is ridiculous. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults. Emma, you're being incredibly selfish. Your father is upset and this is affecting the whole family. Emma, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude needs to stop. We're your family. On December 29th, she took a different strategy. Emma, honey, I think I may have spoken too harshly at dinner. Maybe we can work something out about the money situation. But it wasn't until December 30th that she called and spoke the words I'd been waiting 32 years for. Emma, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I almost did not answer the phone. I'd been screening her calls for days, and James had been encouraging me to take my time before responding. But something about the 10th ring compelled me to pick up. Hello, Mom. Emma, thank God. Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Your father and I have been talking, and I think I owe you an apology. A real one. I waited for him. What I said at dinner was unforgivable. You're not useless. You're the opposite of useless. You've been God, Emma. You've been holding this family together, and I've been treating you terribly. It was the closest thing to a sincere apology I'd ever received from her. But I wasn't ready to let down my guard entirely. Mom, it's not just what you said at dinner. It's been a pattern my entire life. The constant criticism, the comparisons to Lucas and Sophia, the way you dismiss my career and my accomplishments. I know, she said, her voice cracking. I know, and I don't have a good excuse for it. I think maybe I saw myself in you and I was harder on you because of it. What do you mean? I was the middle child, too. I know what it's like to feel invisible. And instead of protecting you from that feeling, I think I made it worse. I think I pushed you harder because I wanted you to be stronger than I was. It wasn't a whole explanation, and it wasn't an excuse, but it was the first time my mother showed me genuine vulnerability or self-awareness. The money stops, Mom. All of it. No more car payments. No more emergency loans. No more bailing anyone out. I understand. You're right to stop. We never should have put that burden on you. And the criticism stops, too. I'm not going to tolerate being belittled anymore, especially in front of other people. Okay? I'll try to do better. Don't try, Mom. Do better. Because if you can't, James and I will build our life without this family's involvement. It was an ultimatum, but it seemed justified. For the first time in my life, I was creating clear boundaries with consequences that I was willing to enforce. 3 months later, my life had drastically changed. The incessant financial worry had vanished, replaced by something I'd never known before: actual savings. For the first time since college, I had money left over at the end of the month. James and I opened a joint savings account and began planning not only our wedding, but our future together. The emotional shift was considerably more pronounced. Without the continual burden of family drama and financial demands, I felt lighter, more confident, and more like myself. My work performance increased significantly once I was no longer distracted by family emergencies and guilt-inducing phone calls. My employer observed the change and hinted at future promotion prospects. "You seem different lately," she commented at my quarterly review. "More focused, more assertive in meetings. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." I was doing something I'd never done before, prioritizing my personal well-being. The family relationships changed substantially after the financial safety net was withdrawn. My father, it turned out, was absolutely oblivious of how much money my mother had borrowed from me. When he realized the full extent of it, he was enraged. 2 years, Catherine? You've been taking money from our daughter without telling me? They ended up going to financial therapy together, which should have happened years before. My father took on a part-time consulting job to augment their income, and my mother eventually realized they had been living beyond their means. Lucas and Sophia, meantime, were forced to confront their own beliefs about family support. Lucas contacted me 7 weeks after Christmas with surprising news. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," said the man. "About how I never asked if you needed help. And you're right. I was so focused on my own problems that I never considered you might have your own. I appreciate you saying that," I quipped. "I want to do better, and I want to start by asking, is there anything you need help with? Anything I can do to support you?" It was a basic question, but none of my siblings had asked it before. We ended up discussing my job aspirations, relationship with James, and future plans. For the first time as adults, Lucas appeared to be truly interested in my existence as a person rather than as a family obligation. Sophia took her time waking up. She remained sensitive about the money issue and appeared to interpret my boundary setting as a personal attack rather than a required shift. But even she began to change her mind, particularly after a talk with our grandma. Margaret had allegedly confronted both of my siblings about their treatment of me over the years. "Your sister has been sacrificing for this family while you two were building your careers," they'd heard her say. "The least you can do is treat her with the respect she deserves." My connection with my mother remained the most complex. She was definitely trying to change her behavior, but decades of set habits do not evaporate overnight. She'd catch herself in the middle of a criticism and apologize, or she'd try to ask about my work in a way that wasn't disparaging. It felt forced at first, but it eventually became more genuine. The real test came when James and I began planning our wedding. I'd been dreading the expected criticism and attempts to control the situation. To my astonishment, my mother kept most of her opinions to herself. When she did make suggestions, she prefaced them with phrases like, "Just an idea," or "Only if you think it would work." "I like the photographer you chose," she commented during one of our preparation sessions. "The samples you showed me are beautiful." It was such a simple, encouraging phrase that I nearly didn't know how to respond. This was what a good family interaction should look like. My father, on the other hand, plunged himself into wedding planning with an unexpected level of excitement. He volunteered to assist with costs, insisted on escorting me down the aisle, and spent hours researching locations and suppliers with me. It was as if he was attempting to make amends for years of ignoring my mother's criticisms. "I'm so proud of you," he told me one afternoon as we tried pastries from a city bakery. "Not just for standing up to your mother, but for building such a good life for yourself. James is a lucky man." Those remarks came from my father and meant everything. The biggest surprise was how many more family members contacted out to support me after hearing the whole tale. My Aunt Clara started phoning on a regular basis to check in. My cousin Lily asked if she could help with the wedding plans. Even some of my more distant relatives attempted to connect with me in ways they had never done before. "I always sensed there was tension," clarified my aunt, "but I never realized how bad it was. Your mother has always been intense, but I didn't know she was being so unfair to you." It turned out that various family members had seen the relationship over time, but had not felt comfortable intervening. My Christmas outburst had given them permission to confront what they had been witnessing but ignoring. The most significant adjustment occurred in my relationship with James' family. Without the continual drain of my own family's conflict, I was able to focus more emotional energy on developing relationships with his parents and siblings. They greeted me with an openness and warmth that I had never known. And for the first time, I realized what healthy family dynamics looked like. "Your family is so normal," I said to James after a Sunday dinner with his parents during which no one criticized anyone and everyone appeared to be truly delighted to be there. "Yours can be too," he added. "It just takes time and boundaries." He was correct. Some of my family ties were slowly healing with clear expectations and repercussions. Not all of them and not entirely, but enough to give me hope that the future will be different than the past. 6 months after that Christmas meal, James and I got married in a quiet ceremony at a historic in about an hour outside of town. The guest list was carefully vetted to include only those who had expressed real support for our relationship and respected both of us as individuals. My father accompanied me down the aisle, tears in his eyes. My grandmother sat on the front row, beaming with pride. My mother was also present, dressed wonderfully and behaving precisely, but I could tell she was struggling to keep her normal remarks to herself. Lucas and Sophia both came, and they appeared really thrilled for us. But the folks who mattered the most were those who had always backed me. James' family, who had welcomed me since the beginning. My Aunt Clara and Cousin Lily, who had been valuable sources of emotional support. And my longtime friends, who had witnessed my battle with family dynamics for years and were overjoyed to see me finally standing up for myself. My grandmother hugged me after the ceremony and whispered, "You look radiant, not just beautiful, but truly happy. That's what I've been waiting to see." During the reception, my father delivered a speech that moved me to tears. "Emma has always been the heart of our family," he told me. "Even when we didn't appreciate her properly. She's kind, generous, hardworking, and loyal to a fault. James, you're not just marrying a wonderful woman. You're marrying someone who will move heaven and earth for the people she loves. I just hope you never take that for granted the way some of us have." It was his public admission of the years of unbalance which meant everything to me. Even my mother was able to offer something appropriate during her quick words. "Emma, I'm sorry it took me so long to see what an amazing daughter I have. I hope you and James build a beautiful life together." Our relationship was not completely repaired, but we made progress. The most crucial moment of the day, however, occurred during our first dance. As James and I swayed to music in front of everyone who truly cared about us, I realized I was experiencing something I'd never felt before at a family gathering. Total genuine happiness. "No regrets," James whispered into my ear. "None," I replied, and I meant it totally. The months that followed were revelatory. Marriage to James exceeded my expectations. We bought a house together with the money I'd saved since I quit financing my family's lifestyle. We traveled. We entertained our friends. We created our own traditions. My career grew in ways I never believed imaginable. Without the continual emotional drain of family conflict, I had more energy to devote to my profession than I had ever had before. I ran great campaigns, developed excellent client connections, and received the promotion my supervisor hinted at. The girl who had been labeled useless suddenly managed her own department. Some family connections improved gradually. My father and I formed a true bond, talking about everything from business, novels, and his new love of carpentry. Lucas made genuine efforts to be there in my life, calling to check in and even seeking my counsel on personal issues. My grandmother became one of my closest confidants, someone I could open up to about everything without fear of being judged. My relationship with my mother remained complex yet functioning. She still struggled with her tendency to criticize, but she caught herself more frequently and made genuine attempts to be supportive. When I told her I was thinking about going back to school for an MBA, she surprised me by saying, "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. You'd be excellent at it." It wasn't the enthusiastic support I might have gotten from Lucas or Sophia, but it was respectful and encouraging, which was more than I could have expected from her. Sophia and I reached a friendly but distant agreement. We were courteous at family gatherings and exchanged pleasantries, but we never formed the close friendship I wished for. That was fine, though. I'd learned that not all family connections can be repaired, and that's not always a sign of personal failure. The most fundamental transformation occurred internally. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't always looking for approval or proving my value. I knew who I was, what I'd accomplished, and how I contributed to my relationships. James' love and respect taught me what it was like to be valued for who I truly was, and I had come to value myself in the same manner. One evening, nearly a year after our wedding, James and I were eating supper when my phone called. It was my mother, which was not unusual at the time, but there was something strange about her voice. "Emma, I need to tell you something," she said. "Your father and I were at the grocery store today, and I ran into Mrs. Thompson from down the street. She was asking about you, and I found myself telling her about your promotion and your new house and how proud I am of you. And then I realized I don't think I've ever actually told you that." "Told me what, Mom?" "That I'm proud of you? That I've always been proud of you, even when I was too stubborn or too focused on what I thought success should look like to admit it. You're an incredible woman, Emma. You're kind and strong and successful and generous. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say that out loud. I had been waiting for this conversation my entire life, and it arrived at a moment when I no longer required it to feel whole. However, the fact that it felt sincere rather than desperate added to its importance. "Thank you, Mom," I replied. "That means a lot. I love you, sweetheart. I should have been saying that more often, too. I love you, too." After I hung up, James smiled at me. "How does it feel?" "Good," I said, and I was astonished to learn I had meant it. "It feels really good, but also I think I would have been okay either way. And it was the true victory. Not that my family had finally learned to respect me, which was amazing. The true accomplishment was that I had learned to respect myself enough to demand better treatment and create a life that did not rely on their approval for happiness. I had discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to quit supporting bad behavior. I had discovered that financial and emotional independence went hand in hand. Most significantly, I discovered that the family you select can be just as essential as the one you're born into. Surrounding yourself with individuals who recognize your worth does not make you selfish. It makes you whole. The little girl who had spent her life trying to earn love had matured into a woman who understood that she was already deserving of love. That made a huge impact. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your support for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps someone else find the courage to speak their truth. Wishing you all the strength to know your worth and the courage to demand the respect you deserve. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Ignored for 30 years. While my golden brother lived off $130,000 in inheritance, he tried to destroy my career. So, I took him down with evidence. My name is Isaac, and I am 32 years old. For most of my life, I felt like a footnote in someone else's legacy, a supporting role in a family drama that revolved solely around my older brother, Noah. From the time he was born, it seemed as if the universe had given him a crown and assigned me the responsibility of wearing his cape. He was the golden boy, the firstborn son whom my parents believed deserved the finest of everything, and they made certain he received it. I used to believe it was due to our parents' upbringing or cultural background. "Your brother's the eldest," my mother would add, as if it were some mystical incantation that justified any harm. My father once told me bluntly, "You'll understand when you have kids. The first one is special." I didn't comprehend. I still don't. But I learned not to ask questions. Instead, I learned to shrink, to be silent, to accept hand-me-downs, forgotten birthdays, and second-best hugs. When my grandparents died, I had a faint hope that things would change, that I would be recognized as more than a shadow in their will. But the pattern persisted. Noah received the house, the one our grandmother used to rock us to sleep in, complete with the rose shrub she planted when we were toddlers. He received the savings account, which grandfather liked to joke was for the boys' futures. He also received grandma's jewelry box, which she had stated she wanted me to have because I was careful with emotional items. But those were only words. Apparently, my name did not appear in the will, not even for the ancient cuckoo clock in the hallway where I used to whine for grandma on Saturdays. The part that wounded me the most was how nonchalant everyone seemed about it. My parents stopped trying to hide their preference. "Your brother has responsibilities," my mother added, as if managing money he didn't earn and a house he didn't tidy made him a martyr. "He's the one who will carry on the family name." My father stated one Thanksgiving as Noah sipped on his fourth whiskey sour. It was as if they were attempting to establish a dynasty with me serving as a backup in the event that the golden kid was injured. So I left quietly. No fight, no spectacular exit. I grabbed a tech support job in another location and worked my way up. Lived small and kept everything. Nobody noticed, nobody called. At Christmas, I received typical group texts from the family chat room. My mom gave me a thumbs-up emoticon for my birthdays. She once sent it a day late, which was great. I wasn't bitter, at least not first. I just calibrated, learned to live quietly. In the meantime, Noah was having a great time. I get glimpses of his life on social media when my curiosity got the best of me. Photos of him at rooftop bars, lying next to pools in Vegas, and smiling with girlfriends whose names changed every several months. He even attempted to establish a podcast about cryptocurrency entrepreneurship for a short period of time. It lasted for 4 episodes. He videotaped them in Grandma's living room surrounded by family heirlooms he had no idea about. I watched 15 minutes of one before closing the page. I recall thinking, this house is going to rot underneath him. It wasn't long until the calls began. Mom was the first to speak, her voice upbeat and easygoing. Hey, sweetheart. Just wondering if you thought about coming home for Easter. Noah would love to see you. Noah is struggling and we need someone responsible around. I did not respond. Then Dad took the guilt away. Family is all we have in this world, son. Don't let grudges ruin that. I wanted to say you wrecked it, but instead I let the stillness extend. Then came the group call. Noah appeared on the screen, looking exhausted and attempting to grin. Bro, he replied. I miss you, man. He let out a feeble little laugh. You still got that apartment in the city? I might be around next week just to catch up. He didn't add that he had sold the house 2 months before to pay off business debts, or that the female he was dating had emptied his account on her way out. But I knew. My cousin Ava told me everything in a late-night direct message. Don't say I told you, she replied. But your brother's living out of a hotel and asking around for loans. Still, I did not say anything. I let silence speak for me. It sounded louder than any insult. 3 weeks later, I unlocked my apartment door in the evening to discover him waiting there. He resembled a ghost with thin features, red-rimmed eyes, and crumpled clothes that appeared to have been worn overnight. The Noah I grew up with, the one who used to call me kiddo while flicking the back of my ear, was no longer there. This variant appeared hollow. He didn't even attempt to simulate charm. I didn't know where else to go, he explained. His voice broke midway through the phrase. I'm in trouble, Danny. That was the first time Dad had addressed me by my name in years. Not bro, dude, or kiddo, just Isaac. I stopped in the doorway, frozen. A small part of me, the younger version of myself, was still waiting for Big Brother to behave decently. I wanted to step aside and say, come in. That meant giving him a blanket, a hot supper, and a bit of the protection I'd carved out for myself. But then I remembered sitting on the steps during my grandmother's burial, listening to him joke with his buddies about flipping the house for a profit. I remember seeing my father offer Noah a check from my college fund, which they said had vanished during the recession so Noah could start something big. I just need a little help, Noah remarked, massaging his eyes. A place to crash alone, maybe. I swear I'll pay you back. I've got a plan. That statement struck me like a punch. I have a plan. He always had a plan. It always ended with someone else cleaning up the messes. My hand clenched on the doorframe. I examined his face. The same look that laughed at every insult my parents tolerated. The same face that received my future as a party goodie. I did not yell. I didn't even raise my voice. Funny, I said. That's exactly what you left me with. His eyes fluttered. Confusion followed by realization and then something else. Maybe it's shame or just discomfort. I couldn't wait to find out. I stepped back and shut the door. And through the peephole, I saw him remain there for a moment, then turn and shuffle back toward a waiting Uber without luggage, hope, or a return ticket. But what occurred next? That's when everything began to collapse because closing the door was only the start. The fallout was still coming. The next morning, I received an SMS from my mother. Only one line. I heard what happened last night. Call me. No, how are you? No pleasantries. Just that ambiguous, heavy sentence, carrying the weight of 1,000 hidden expectations. I stared at it for a while, sipping lukewarm coffee and wondering how fast Noah had crawled back. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with her name. I let it ring. Then again I turned off the ringer. Then came the voicemail. Isaac, it's your mother. I don't know what's gotten into you, but Noah is your brother. Family helps each other, especially when one of us is down. I expect a call back. The irony almost had me laughing. Families benefit one another. Since when? I spent the day in silence, focusing on work and keeping my phone on silent. That evening, I checked my email and found a message headlined, "Family Meeting Sunday at 3 p.m. It was transmitted by my father to a chain that included me, Noah, and my parents. I nearly didn't open it, but curiosity got the best of me. It was brief, formal, and written like a memo from someone who had forgotten how to be a father, and instead structured each sentence like a business agreement. We're going to settle this like adults. This family cannot survive with division and cold shoulders. Your brother needs support. We're hoping you'll be reasonable." Reasonable? I gazed at the word until it blurred. They portrayed it as reasonable to give Noah the house while I lived on a mattress in a shared college dorm and worked evenings to pay rent. Reasonable is how they justified squandering the family savings to cover his failing app idea while informing me they couldn't afford to pay me a single visit after I moved. Noah stole Grandma's ring, the one she told me to retain for someone special someday, and gave it to a lady he had just dated 3 months before. And now they expected me to be sensible. However, a part of me hesitated. I was not heartless. I didn't want to retain a grudge indefinitely. Perhaps a part of me still wanted them to recognize their mistake, to repent even once for making me the family afterthought. So I went. Sunday arrived and I drove 2 hours back to my hometown. The house appeared exactly the same. Nothing has changed. Not the crumbling stone mailbox, nor the faded swing set in the backyard that hadn't moved since we were youngsters. The wind chimes I used to hear from my bedroom continued to jingle in the breeze. But the air felt different. When I entered, my mother greeted me with a tight smile. My father was already seated at the dining table, not in his normal chair, indicating that this was official. Noah sat across from him, crouched with a hoodie pulled over his head like a shell. His eyes were sunken deeper than usual. He did not look up. "Thanks for coming," my father remarked, motioning for me to sit. My mother brought out iced tea as if it were just another summer afternoon. "Quit the small talk," I stated simply. "You asked me here to talk, so talk." My father cleared his throat before folding his hands. "Noah made mistakes. He admits that. But you slamming the door in his face, that's not how we solve things. That's not who we are." I raised an eyebrow. "We? You mean the same we that gave him everything and left me nothing that week?" My mother's smile froze. My father flinched but pressed on. "He was the eldest, Isaac. He had more on his shoulders. We did what we thought was right. And now," I inquired, leaning forward, "you think I should clean up the mess you enable?" Silence. My mother sat down inside. "He has nothing left. Not even a car. He's been sleeping on couches, Isaac. He had a house. He sold it. He had savings. He burned through it. He had jewelry, property, family money, and blew it all on parties, girls, and bad crypto tips. Don't tell me he has nothing. He chose nothing." Noah eventually looked up. His voice was raw. "I messed up. Okay. I know I don't deserve it, but I just need a place to stay. A job lead. Something." I stared at him, at the desperate tone in his voice. The Noah I grew up with would never have begged. He would have made a joke, shrugged it off, and dubbed me a loser if I hadn't assisted. But this Noah was empty. "I got where I am by myself," I explained. "No trust fund, no family support. I worked while studying. I lived in a shoebox. I fixed people's printers and answered angry customers for years while you flew first class to Ibiza." "I know," Noah said. "I know I don't deserve it, Dan. I just—" He trailed off and my father continued where he left off. "We're asking you, son, as a family. Can't you lend him a hand?" I glanced at all three of them, and it struck me. They weren't asking for assistance. They demanded sacrifice again. Just as always, wrapped in remorse, iced tea, and familial values. I stood up. "I don't owe you anything," I said. "Not after the years you pretended I didn't exist. You gave him everything. Now you can live with the results." I turned to Noah. "You burned your inheritance on fun. I built my peace with nothing, and I'm not going to ruin it for nostalgia." My mother's eyes watered. My father seemed to want to talk but couldn't find the words, and Noah only nodded as if he'd finally understood. I left the house without saying anything else. There were no slamming doors or yelling, only the silent sound of sneakers on hardwood and 3 people paralyzed in the disaster they had produced. But it was not the end because I didn't realize Noah wasn't done trying, and his next move was going to take this whole family drama to a place neither of us were prepared for. A week has gone by. I assumed that was the end of it. No more calls or voicemails. The silence felt almost like a reward, as if my absence had finally been acknowledged. I concentrated on work, cleaning my flat, and remembering the simple rituals that had kept me sane as a child. I did not check the family group chat. I didn't go through Noah's social media. I didn't care what happened next until I received a call from HR at my workplace. "Isaac," my boss continued, appearing embarrassed and faintly regretful. "We just had a strange message come through our general inbox. Someone sent an anonymous tip alleging you falsified your qualifications when you were hired, that your degree was fake." My stomach sank. "What?" I inquired, my tone rougher than me. "That's not true." "I figured," he replied. "Your credentials are all in order. We already verified them when you started." But the email came with a long message and some personal details. Your home address, your mother's maiden name, even the last 4 digits of your old bank account. It did not take long to put together. Only 3 people in the world had access to that particular set of information, and 2 of them were seated at that dining table last Sunday. It was Noah. He'd devolved into something petty and nasty, like a drowning man attempting to drag someone else under in order to breathe for another second. When polite requests failed, he resorted to sabotage. I sat at my desk, pulse hammering and hands numb. The transgression, the sheer arrogance made my skin crawl. He hadn't simply disrespected my boundaries. He'd used my family past to try to destroy the life I'd established. I opened up my email. Sure enough, there it was. An anonymous Gmail address with a confused subject line. I opened it and clenched my jaw as I read the message. This man has a history of lying. He manipulated his family into giving him money and then cut them off when they needed help. Ask him why he changed his last name when he moved. Ask him why no one in his family speaks to him anymore. There were attachments. I have old images from my college years. One image depicted me sitting at a desk with a stack of outstanding invoices. Another was a fuzzy scan of a half transcript from a community college that I never completed before transferring. None of them proved anything, but they all painted a picture. One intended to create just enough doubt. And it was concluded with a single sentence. You don't know who you hired. I wasn't even aware I was shaking until I dropped my mouse. I called my manager back right away. He told me that the email had already been noticed and rejected, and that the company did not tolerate anonymous slander without evidence. But he stated something else. You might want to handle whatever's going on at home, he suggested gently. Because whoever sent that, they're not done. I ended the conversation and sat there staring out the window. The city skyline felt remote, as if it belonged to a world I no longer knew. My sanctuary, my apartment, felt smaller now. I had a fleeting thought that I should have blocked his number the moment he came up at my door. Instead, I let guilt overcome me. I attended that meeting as if it were a negotiation. I gave him an opportunity to be human. And now he was attempting to destroy everything I'd accomplished simply because I said no. I took out my old external hard disk, which I hadn't touched in years. It was full with backups, including images, receipts, and emails. I began digging not because I was terrified, but because I was done with defense. See, the problem with being neglected your entire life is that you become adept at observing, at remembering, and by filing away items that others believe you will forget. And Noah had made a lot of blunders, not only with money. I'd helped him compose some emails back in the day. One to a girl's enraged father after she accused Noah of pressing her for cash. Another to a questionable cryptocurrency site where he boasted about using family riches to support high-risk bets. There were chat logs, screenshots, even a folder named Marketing LLC, a fictitious company he established to qualify for a business loan with a doctored bank statement I discovered on a flash drive years before. I hadn't saved these items for vengeance. I had just never thrown them away. But suddenly, I had everything I needed. But I wasn't about to play his game. I was not going to send anonymous tips. I wasn't going to respond with petty sabotage. I was going to show him what it was like when the person you dismissed became the one thing you couldn't ignore. I created a professional, clear letter. Every accusation was supported by proof. Every paragraph included an official document. Then I emailed it, not to my company, but to the bank Noah had duped with his loan swindle, the one I recognized from the previous statements on that journey. I did not transmit it anonymously. I signed it with my entire name because if Noah wanted a fight, I was finished cowering in the shadows. I hadn't heard anything for about a month. On a wet Tuesday morning, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. It was a woman from Harborview Bank's fraud division. "Hi, is this Isaac Reyes?" "Yes. I just wanted to confirm. You're the one who submitted the packet regarding Noah Reyes and the 2021 loan under Marketing LLC. I felt my spine straightening. Yes, that was me. There was a pause. The type with weight. Thank you. The documentation was very thorough. We've been sitting on a soft flag for that account for almost a year. We couldn't prove anything until now. She did not say much else. Couldn't legally, but I could tell from the tone in her speech that things were already in motion. I hung up and gazed at my phone for an entire minute. I hadn't felt so quiet within in years. Not numb, but serene. I felt as if I had finally emerged from a storm that everyone else had mistaken for sunshine. 3 days later, I received a text from my cousin Ava, just a screenshot. The photo showed Noah being led out of what seemed to be a hotel lobby by 2 plainclothes officers. Below it was a message. "So, he's being investigated. Bank fraud, identity misrepresentation, loan default. Your dad is livid." I stared at it for a long time, barely understanding what I was witnessing. The man who used to mock the system while drinking drinks had now lost the game. But what struck me the most was that I did not feel triumphant. I felt neither joy nor smugness. I felt finished. A few days after the arrest, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. This time, her voice was weak, lacking polish and composure. "Isaac, I don't know what's happening. Your father's pacing the house like a madman. They're saying Noah might have used forged documents. The bank's been calling. We didn't know. We didn't know he was doing that." Another pause. "I know you're angry. I know we've hurt you, but please don't destroy him. He's still your brother." It would have been so simple to call her back, to shout about the years of favoritism, missed birthdays, and inheritance siphoned into Noah's coffers. To inquire as to where this concern was when I was being disregarded, when I was surviving on bargain cereal and doing night shifts while Noah had vacations and bailouts. But I did not because it wasn't important anymore. I blocked her phone number and then I blocked my father. Then I left the family group chat totally. I destroyed the old email threads, images, and text archives that I had saved as mementos of a life I thought I was meant to want. When the story hit the local press, it spread like wildfire in our town. A local man has been charged with fraud in the $130,000 small business loan scheme. The report contained a number of aliases: Marketing LLC, Sunvest Solutions, and even Reyes Holdings, which made me laugh out loud as if he was attempting to construct a phony empire behind a borrowed name. There were quotes from persons he had defrauded: a gym owner who never received payment, a college student who worked for him for a commission that never materialized. A female claimed she lent him $3,000 for a business trip that he never took. One of them mentioned, "He talked like he had it all figured out, like he was doing me a favor. I should have known it was all smoke." The fallout was terrible. The bank froze his account. His cryptocurrency investments had plummeted months ago. His car, which was leased rather than owned, was repossessed. His last known address was a month-to-month sublet that he had not paid for in 6 weeks. What about his friends? Gone. All of them. Those that partied with him in Vegas, those that shared filtered group photos with #grindset and #hustle hashtags. None of them paid a visit. When the mugshot was released, none of them responded on his social media accounts. Ava informed me that my parents attempted to take out a second mortgage to pay a defense attorney. It was denied because they had already used the property as collateral for Noah's previous business failure, which he dubbed a game changer. They no longer owned the deed. Ava provided one final update before I urged her not to bring it up again. "They're selling the jewelry," she explained. "Grandma's necklace, the ring, even her brooch. I sat on it for a while. Not because I wanted the jewelry, not because I sought vengeance. But in that instant, I realized something. My parents had spent 3 decades giving everything to one son and watching him burn it to ashes. And they spent the same decades disregarding the other, the quiet one, the consistent one, as if he were an afterthought. And suddenly the precious kid had become dust, and the shadow. He had established a life. 3 months have gone by, then I received a letter in the mail, handwritten. There was no return address, but the penmanship looked familiar. It was from Noah. The letter was short, sloppy, and barely a page long. He wrote, "I know what you did, and I don't blame you. I hate what I've become. I'm scared. I don't expect forgiveness, but if you ever feel like talking, I'll be here. I've got nowhere else to go." I folded the letter, returned it to the envelope, and slipped it into a drawer I hadn't opened in years. The one where I kept old keys, fading receipts, and items I never tossed away. Then I shut the drawer, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was carrying someone else's weight. I did not respond to Noah. I did not write back. I did not tell anyone. I simply stood up, strolled to my kitchen, poured myself a drink, and gazed out at a skyline I created entirely on my own. There is no inheritance, no help. It's just grit and memories and the gradual hard process of prioritizing peace over family. And you know what? That was enough. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My name's James. I'm 42 and I thought I had a decent life. Not perfect, I don't think anyone's is, but decent. Married for 16 years. 2 kids, Mia and Logan. I've always been a family-first kind of guy. I coach Logan's soccer team, used to braid Mia's hair before school, and I've never once missed a birthday or a holiday. I've worked in IT remote for the past 6 years, which meant I could pick the kids up from school, help with homework, be there. My wife, Eliza, works in real estate. She's great at it. Always dressed to impress, always talking, always moving. For a long time, I admired her energy. Now, I'm not sure if I ever really knew her. Father's Day was coming up. You'd think after so many years it would lose a bit of its shine, but I always looked forward to it. It wasn't about the gifts or anything grand. It was the one day where I felt seen, appreciated. A card, maybe breakfast in bed, a morning of cartoons with the kids, something simple. But that year, Eliza kept hinting at something big. "Don't make any plans," she kept saying, smiling just a little too wide. "We've got something special in store." Mia even giggled when I tried to guess. "You'll see," she said. "You'll love it." I woke up that Sunday, and the bed was empty. No smell of pancakes. No footsteps down the hall. Just the hum of the ceiling fan and the silence of a house not waiting for me. I figured maybe they were setting something up. I brushed my teeth, threw on a hoodie, and waited. 9 o'clock, still quiet. No noise from the kitchen. I checked Mia's room. Empty. Same with Logan's. I looked in the garage. Eliza's car was gone. By noon, I was confused. Maybe there was some mix-up. Maybe they'd gone out to get something, or there was a reservation I didn't know about. I checked my phone for a message. Anything? Nothing. Then I opened Instagram. That was the moment everything shifted. A story from Mia. A boomerang of a mimosa clinking with a glass of orange juice. Then a slow pan across a restaurant table. Eliza, Mia, Logan, and her sister Tasha. Everyone smiling, laughing. The caption hit me like a punch to the gut. "Best dad ever when he's not around, lol." I didn't even know how to react. I just stared at the screen. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing, but my chest was already ahead of it. Tightening up, burning. Was this a joke? A prank? Was I not invited? I didn't text. I didn't call. I just sat there, phone in hand, still in my hoodie. The same one Mia had gotten me last Christmas. I waited and waited. Nothing. The rest of the day was a blur. I remember heating up leftover pasta, sitting on the porch with the dog, watching the sky get dark, and wondering if they'd even come home that night. They didn't. Monday came and went. I worked, logged into meetings, went through the motions. No one mentioned Father's Day, not my coworkers, not my family. I started to wonder if I was the crazy one. Tuesday morning around 9:20 a.m., my phone exploded. 63 missed calls, a dozen texts, and one from Mia that just said, "Please come home." We didn't know. That was the moment I realized something deeper was going on. Something worse than just being forgotten or left out, because they had come home and I wasn't there. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Why didn't I go back? Why didn't I blow up their phones on Sunday, demand answers, show up at that brunch in person? I've asked myself that, too. But when something like this happens, something so off-kilter, you don't react the way you think you would. You freeze. You wait. You hope it's not what it looks like, that there's a logical explanation, some surprise twist where everything's okay. But I had a creeping feeling in my gut that told me, James, you're not the main character anymore. Not in your own home. Still, I didn't respond. Not immediately. I needed to understand what the hell had happened. Why a day meant for me had turned into a celebration of me not being there. Why Mia, who used to draw me stick figure cards and call me her superhero dad, was now posting stories like I was a joke. The voicemail from Eliza was frantic. James, please call me. The kids are upset. I don't know what you're doing, but this isn't funny. Just come home. We can talk. Please. I listened to it twice. Her voice was shaky, but not apologetic, not even surprised, more annoyed, like I was the one pulling a stunt. That's when I decided to start digging. I logged into our shared Google account. I knew she never signed out, not because she trusted me, but because she wasn't tech-savvy. Calendar entries, emails, locations, all synced. I scrolled through her recent searches and saw Father's Day brunch ideas, funny dad captions, and strangely, how to handle manipulative husbands. That stopped me cold. Then, in her emails, a thread with her sister. Subject, Sunday plans. I clicked it open. There it was. Just make sure James doesn't find out, Tasha had written. Eliza's reply, he won't. I told him it's a surprise. This way we can have a peaceful brunch for once. He'll probably enjoy the quiet. Peaceful brunch. Enjoy the quiet. That's when something snapped. All these years I thought I was appreciated. Maybe not celebrated, I wasn't looking for parades, but at least respected. But to be left behind, lied to, then mocked online? That was something else entirely. That was premeditated cruelty. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't call back. I started going over every little thing I'd overlooked over the past year. The late-night showings that took hours. The way Logan started calling Tasha's husband, Uncle Mark, more affectionately than me. The way Mia had started rolling her eyes when I asked her to spend time together. The way Eliza would sigh when I talked about work, like I was boring her. I started seeing it all differently. Not as isolated moments, but as pieces of a bigger picture I'd refused to look at. I checked the home cameras. We'd installed them 2 years ago after a break-in scare. Eliza had access too, but she rarely used them. I pulled up the footage from Sunday morning. At 7:46 a.m., I saw them all piling into the car. Mia dressed in a pink sundress. Logan in a little button-up and khakis. Eliza in heels, laughing. She tossed a glance toward the front door where I was still asleep and said something I couldn't hear. The three of them laughed. Then they drove off. They hadn't just left me. They'd laughed. And for what? A joke? A break? A photo op? That night, I packed a bag. Laptop, chargers, a week's worth of clothes. I didn't leave a note. I knew they'd notice soon enough. I checked into a hotel across town. Nothing fancy, just a place with working Wi-Fi and clean sheets. I needed space. I needed time. But more than that, I needed a plan, because something in me had shifted. something I couldn't put back. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to play the fool anymore. And I wasn't going home. Not yet. Not until I decided what kind of storm I was going to bring with me. The first night at the hotel, I barely slept. Not because the bed was uncomfortable. It was fine, better than the pull-out couch I used during Logan's sleepovers, but because my brain wouldn't shut off. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind jumping between memories like a broken slideshow. Christmas mornings, soccer games, Mia's science fair, late nights on the porch with Eliza when the kids were little, just sipping coffee and talking about dreams. But now those same memories felt distorted, like someone had scribbled over them in red ink. I kept replaying that brunch story in my head. The laughter, the mimosa, that caption. Best dad ever when he's not around, LOL. That word LOL looped in my head like a bad song. It was casual, offhand, like I was some sitcom character they could laugh about. But I wasn't. I was the guy who paid for the mortgage, fixed the leaky sink, helped with algebra homework, gave up job opportunities so I could be home more. And apparently none of that had meant anything. Tuesday night, I finally messaged Mia. Just 2 words. I saw. I watched. She read it almost immediately. Then the typing bubble appeared and vanished. Reappeared. Vanished again. I waited, heart racing, but no reply came. Just silence. I was halfway through a takeout burger when my phone lit up. This time it was Logan. Dad, are you mad? Mad? That wasn't the word. I wasn't mad like when someone cuts you off in traffic. I was gutted, hollowed out, but I didn't want to put that on an 11-year-old. I'm okay, I texted. We'll talk soon. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. That hurt more than it should have. By Wednesday, Eliza had tracked down the hotel. I don't know how, maybe she checked my last credit card charge. Maybe she guessed. She called the front desk and they passed her through to my room. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail again, this one tighter, more controlled. James, this is getting ridiculous. The kids are worried. You're making a bigger deal out of this than it needs to be. Can we please just talk like adults? Come home. We'll clear the air. Like adults. Like adults who ditch you on a holiday and post about it publicly. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to work. I wasn't just sitting around anymore. I started pulling pieces together. First, I made a copy of every financial file we had. Bank accounts, credit cards, mortgage, investment accounts. Eliza handled most of our finances. She'd insisted, said she was better with numbers. I trusted her, but now I wanted to see everything, and I did. There were odd charges, Venmo payments to names I didn't recognize. A rental deposit paid in full in another city. Weekly lunch charges from a restaurant far from her usual listings. My stomach turned. Then I dug into our shared Dropbox. Years ago, we used it for family photos, travel plans, budgeting spreadsheets. She still used it occasionally, probably forgot I even had access. Buried in a subfolder was a document titled Plan B. I opened it, pulse pounding. It was a list, a very detailed one. New apartment walkthrough, check. Lawyer consult scheduled, check. Joint account split estimate. What to do if James resists. Tasha can talk to him. Keep kids neutral. Don't overshare. I just sat there for a long time staring at it. If James resists, like I was an obstacle, like I was a thing to be managed. Not a person, not her husband, not their father. This wasn't just a brunch. This was an escape plan. And that's when the weight of it really hit me. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd excluded me on purpose to test the waters. See how life felt without me. And maybe if I hadn't checked Instagram, they would have carried on like nothing happened. Let the plan unfold on their terms. Quiet, neat, controlled. But now the ball was in my court. I took the rest of that Wednesday to get my ducks in a row. I made appointments, called a friend who worked in family law, rented a private mailbox, opened a separate bank account. I wasn't planning to burn the house down, not yet, but I was making sure if Eliza wanted war, she wouldn't be the only one holding the match. Thursday morning, I got an email from the school. Mia had skipped 2 classes. Logan had been pulled out early. My guess? Eliza trying to smooth things over. Paint this as, Daddy's having a moment. But I knew my kids. Mia might be drifting, sure, but Logan, he was a straight arrow. If he left early, it was because he was confused, hurt. I decided it was time to talk to them. Not Eliza, not yet, but the kids. I texted Mia. Meet me at the diner near the park. 5 p.m. Just you and Logan. No pressure. She replied within 5 minutes. Okay. At 4:50, I was already in the booth. A milkshake waiting for Logan and fries for Mia, her favorite. They walked in holding hands, both looking smaller than I remembered. Mia had her hoodie pulled over her head, and Logan wouldn't stop fidgeting with his sleeve. Mia slid into the booth and stared at me. Her eyes were puffy. She looked like she hadn't slept. Dad, she started. But I held up my hand. Let me go first. They listened. I told them everything I knew. That I saw the brunch. That I read the messages. That I knew about the emails. I didn't yell. I didn't guilt-trip them. I just laid it out. Mia looked like she wanted to disappear into her seat. We didn't know the whole plan, she said finally. Mom said you were tired. That you'd be annoyed if we made a fuss. That it was just one brunch. She said it was a girl's thing, Logan muttered. But then I was there too. I nodded. I know it's not your fault, but I want you to hear this from me. I'm not disappearing. I love you both. And no matter what happens between me and Mom, you're still my kids. Mia started crying. Logan did too. And in that moment, I realized something. Eliza might have been planning her perfect escape, but she hadn't told the kids the whole story. She tried to rope them into her narrative, but they were still on the fence. Still reachable. I hugged them both before they left. Told them I'd be in touch soon. Told them things were going to be okay, even if they didn't look like they used to. Back at the hotel that night, I poured myself a drink. Sat at the tiny desk with my laptop open and stared at the folder I'd built. I named it Reset because that's what this was. Not just revenge, not justice, a reset. But first, I had one more conversation to have, one that had been a long time coming. I opened my phone, scrolled to Eliza's name, and hit record on the voice memo app. Then I called. Her voice came on, smooth as ever. James, finally. Are you ready to stop being dramatic? I smiled. Not dramatic, Eliza. Just getting started. And then I asked her one question. A question I already knew the answer to, and waited for her to lie. So I said evenly, how long have you been planning to leave me? The silence that followed was thick. No breathing, no shuffling. Just the low static hum of tension vibrating through the line. Then finally, she responded. What? Her voice was higher than usual, almost light, dismissive. I asked how long. I repeated, my tone still calm. You know, plan B. The apartment, the lawyer consult, the budget spreadsheet. I read it all, Eliza. I know. She laughed, short, forced, like a cough dressed up as amusement. You went through my stuff. You left it in our shared folder. I said. You didn't even bother to hide it. Was I supposed to keep smiling while you packed your escape route? Another pause. Then her voice hardened. You don't understand. Things haven't been working for a long time. You just don't see it because you're always in your own world. I felt something flicker in my chest. Not pain, not yet. Just the familiar sting of being blamed for someone else's detour. I work from home. I drive the kids. I cook. I clean. I tried to give you space, time, support. If I missed something, you could have said so. But instead, you planned a brunch to celebrate me not being there. You're twisting it, she snapped. It was supposed to be lighthearted. It was supposed to be a test run, I said. And you know it. Her silence told me everything I needed. Do they know? I asked. Mia and Logan? About the apartment? The lawyer? No, she said quickly. Of course not. Why would I tell them something that might not even happen? Because it already is happening, Eliza. I let that hang. I knew I was pushing her, but I needed to see what she'd do. If she'd back down, if she'd deny everything. But instead, she doubled down. I'm not doing this with you over the phone, she said curtly. If you want to talk, come home. Why? So I can walk into a house that's already been emotionally emptied out. You're being dramatic, James. There it was again. That word. I'm being precise. I said, lowering my voice. And for what it's worth, you could have told me the truth. You didn't have to turn the kids into pawns in some sick little performance. Don't you dare drag them into this. I already met with them. I cut in. They're not stupid. They feel it too. You've been playing chess, Eliza, and I'm just now realizing I was never your partner. I was a piece. Another silence. But this one felt different. Not stunned, calculated. Okay, she said finally. So what now? Now? That was the question. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to sweat a little, feel what it was like to be left in the dark for once. But more importantly, I needed more time to prepare, because what I was planning wasn't just revenge. It was revelation, a carefully constructed unraveling. I'll be in touch, I said and ended the call. I sat there for a moment, letting the quiet fill the space where her voice had been. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. I wasn't out to destroy her. I was out to expose the version of herself she had worked so hard to sell to me, to the kids, to the world, and let the truth speak for itself. That night, I called my lawyer friend, Darren. We'd gone to college together, lost touch, and reconnected last year when his firm helped with some tech compliance contracts. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. Just the basics. Eliza's planning something. I found documentation. I need to protect myself and the kids. He didn't ask why I hadn't come to him sooner. Just said, let's meet Friday. I'll prep the paperwork. Bring everything you have. That gave me 2 days. 2 days to finish what I'd started. The next morning, I went to our safe deposit box. Something Eliza probably forgot existed. Inside were old documents, insurance policies, backup drives, and importantly, the original house deed. I made copies of everything, then went to the bank to freeze the joint savings account. Not drain it, just freeze it. I didn't want to financially ruin her. I just wanted to make it very clear I wasn't the passive fool she'd taken me for, that the man she left behind on Father's Day was not the same man she was dealing with now. When I returned to the hotel, there was a letter under my door. James, please. We need to talk. The kids are scared. I don't know what you're doing, but we're still a family. Let's just come home. I'll explain everything. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed. That small detail told me more than the words did. She still thought this was damage control, that I could be talked down, that a warm smile and a few tears could smooth over weeks, maybe months of manipulation. She didn't realize yet that the story had changed. So, I did something she never expected. I wrote my own letter, not to her, to the kids. I wrote about how much I love them, how I was still their dad, how I wasn't running away but choosing to fight differently. I explained in age-appropriate terms that sometimes adults lie, even the ones we trust, and that when they do, we don't repay that lie with more silence. We speak up. We stand tall. We protect what matters. I told them I would never ask them to choose sides, that I knew they loved their mom and that was okay. But I also told them I wouldn't be a ghost in their life, not even for one more day. And then I mailed the letter. Not emailed, not texted, mailed. Tangible. Something they could hold. Something real. I was done with illusions. That night, I went through the last of the digital files. Old voicemails, screenshots, calendar notes. Little pieces of evidence that showed just how long I'd been living in a house where the door had already been quietly closing behind me. By the time Friday morning rolled around, I was ready. I showed up to Darren's office with a flash drive, 2 binders, and a list of questions. Legal custody, financial separation, emergency arrangements. I wanted to be thorough, not for revenge, but for my kids, so they'd never have to wonder who fought for them. Halfway through the meeting, my phone buzzed. A new Instagram post from Eliza. It was a picture of her and the kids smiling. A throwback photo. The caption read, "Some people break your heart and still expect you to love them." And just like that, I realized she'd started spinning her version of the story publicly before the truth could catch up. But she'd miscalculated one thing. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. And when I was done, everyone would know who she really was. I waited exactly 1 week. Not because I was unsure I wasn't, but because revenge, real revenge, doesn't come from rage. Comes from clarity, precision. I wanted Eliza to sit with her choices, watch her narrative spin, feel like she had the upper hand. That's what made what came next so much more satisfying. It started with the truth. I posted a letter, not to social media. I wasn't going to play her game on her turf, but to our neighborhood forum, the school parent board, and yes, a private post sent to every family member on both sides. I kept it calm, mature, just facts. I told them what had happened on Father's Day. No drama, no flourishes. Just that I woke up alone, and while my family smiled over pancakes and mimosas, I sat at home wondering what I'd done wrong. I mentioned the Instagram story, the caption, the silence, and how when I asked for honesty, what I got instead was a digital trail of betrayal, a documented plan to replace me, to move on without confronting me like an adult, like a partner. I didn't name-call. I didn't curse. But I made it clear I was not disappearing. I was not shrinking. I was not the villain. Then came the second part of the plan, legal. Darren had helped me draft the papers. Separation, custody, and a financial breakdown that reflected my years of contribution. Not just the income, but the time, the unpaid labor, the coaching, the late-night science projects, the hospital visits, the emotional anchor I'd been while Eliza ran off to show listings and smile for strangers. We served her during one of her open houses. The courier walked right in, said her name, and handed her the envelope while she stood in a sunlit living room in front of a young couple looking to buy their first home. Poetic. After that, it unraveled quickly. She tried to do damage control, reached out to friends, said I was being vindictive, emotionally unstable, even manipulative. But by then, it was too late. The receipts were everywhere. Her plan B wasn't just a bad secret. It was a blueprint for calculated emotional neglect. People started backing away. Friends we'd known for years stopped replying to her group texts. Her sister Tasha, who had once been smug enough to laugh along on that brunch, quietly took a trip out of state and didn't come back for 3 weeks. I think she realized she'd been caught in the blast radius. Mia and Logan stayed with me most of that first month. Not because I asked, because they chose to. And that was the final nail in Eliza's narrative. She couldn't spin herself as the stable one when the kids kept packing their bags and asking if they could just go back to Dad's. And me? I rebuilt. Not quickly, not perfectly, but I stopped living like a ghost in my own story. I signed a new lease on a house nearby, smaller, but cozy. I let Mia decorate her room however she wanted. Logan got a loft bed and glow-in-the-dark stars. We made waffles on Saturdays. I started journaling, went back to the gym, laughed again. And I told the kids the truth, gently but honestly. That love doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you. That respect goes both ways, and that being a parent, a real parent, means showing up even when it hurts. Eliza and I finalized the divorce 6 months later. She didn't fight it too hard in the end. I think she knew. The image had cracked, and no amount of filters could put it back together. The last time we saw each other in person, she tried one more time. "You really made this ugly, James." I looked her straight in the eye. "No," I said. "You did. I just stopped cleaning up after you." She didn't reply, just stood there, lips pressed tight as I walked away with my kids. And as I closed the door behind me, I realized something I wish I had known sooner. Sometimes being the bigger person means knowing when to stop carrying people who were never walking beside you in the first place. That was the day I finally came home for real. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I never thought I'd have to deal with this again. My name's Emma and I'm 26. I've spent the past few years building my life and finally achieving the peace I craved. My own apartment, no roommates, no family drama. That is, until my mom told me something that completely flipped everything upside down. I was sitting in my living room sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone when the phone call came in. It was a Saturday morning and I was still in my pajamas, just trying to enjoy a quiet weekend. I wasn't expecting anything big. Maybe a grocery list from my mom, a random family update, or something trivial. But this call was anything but. "Hey, honey." Mom's voice sounded a little too casual, like she was about to say something she knew would make me angry. "What's up?" I replied, trying to sound as relaxed as I could. "Well, we've been talking and we think it's time your brother moved in with you," she said nonchalantly, like this was a perfectly normal request. "He's going through a rough patch and it's just temporary." Of course, I froze. "Jake, my younger brother." The one who's never had to take responsibility for anything in his life. The one who's always bailed out by mom and dad at the slightest sign of trouble. The one who ruined everything for everyone just by existing in our house. And now mom was telling me he was moving in with me. I couldn't hold back the frustration that bubbled up in my chest. Wait, what? You're kidding, right? Why doesn't he stay with you guys? Sweetie, you know we have our hands full, she said, as though that explained everything. And your apartment is the perfect size for him. It'll only be for a few months tops. I bit my lip, trying not to scream. Mom, I didn't agree to this. I live alone because I need space. I didn't sign up for this. Her tone didn't change. Emma, it's just for a little while. You'll be fine. It'll be good for you to have family around. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt like I was being cornered. There was no room for discussion here. No negotiation. The decision had already been made for me. I'll start preparing the guest room, I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. Thank you, sweetie, Mom said, her voice filled with relief. You're such a good sister. Jake will be so happy. I ended the call with a tight smile, trying to breathe through the sudden wave of anger flooding my chest. Jake had been given everything his whole life. No consequences for his actions, no responsibilities, just constant handouts from mom and dad. And now I was expected to take him in as though everything was perfectly fine. I couldn't let this happen. Not in my space, not in my home. Over the next few days, the anger didn't subside. Every time I walked into the guest room and looked around, I could feel my blood boiling. I hated the idea of him living here. Jake would take over everything, eat all my food, leave his stuff everywhere, and still expect me to take care of him like I always did when we were kids. Then the worst part of it all came on Thursday morning. When I was still trying to wrap my head around the situation, I saw my mom's name pop up on my phone again. Hey, sweetie, she said in a cheerful tone, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. I just wanted to let you know we made a copy of the spare key for Jake. He'll need it to get in when you're not around. I could feel my stomach drop. What? You gave him a key already? My voice cracked and I could feel my grip tightening around my phone. Well, of course, honey. He'll need access when you're at work or out with friends. It's just easier that way. I couldn't believe this was happening. My parents had already planned it all out. They'd given him the key before even asking me. My personal space, my home, wasn't mine anymore. It was being handed over without a second thought. The old Emma would have just sucked it up, let things slide, and kept quiet. But not this time. Not anymore. I put my phone down, stood up, and walked over to the front door. The spare key was hanging there on the hook where I always kept it. I stared at it for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I knew what I had to do. Without a second thought, I grabbed the spare key and walked to the lock. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. If Jake was going to have a key, I was going to make sure he earned it. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust my parents to protect my space, my boundaries. It wasn't about being petty or spiteful. It was about maintaining some sense of control over my life. I got a new set of locks and changed them that afternoon. I'd already found a locksmith who could come over quickly. The feeling of power when the new locks clicked into place was something I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't the same as just getting angry and letting it fester. This time I was taking action. I was protecting what was mine. As the day went on, I kept thinking about how I'd explain this to my mom. I knew she wouldn't understand. She'd probably call me selfish or accuse me of making things harder than they had to be. But I didn't care. This was my home, and if I had to fight for it, I would. The next morning, Jake was supposed to show up. My mom called to confirm he was on his way, and I could hear the excitement in her voice as she talked about how great it would be for us to spend time together. I didn't say anything. I simply replied, "Yeah, sounds good, Mom." When the doorbell rang later that day, I took a deep breath. I knew the moment had come. My brother would show up with his bags and his entitlement, expecting things to go just like they always had. But this time, he'd find out that things were different, that the key he thought he had didn't work anymore. I opened the door, ready to face him. Jake stood there, a smug smile on his face, and I could see the moment his smile faltered as he reached into his pocket and realized that the key he had wasn't going to help him anymore. Emma, he said, holding up the key. It's not working. I crossed my arms, looking him in the eye. I know. You'll have to ring the bell from now on. The old key doesn't work anymore. His face twisted in confusion and frustration, and I could see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't used to not getting what he wanted immediately. This isn't funny, Jake said, his voice growing tense. Mom said I could just move in, and now you're changing the locks. Yeah, I said. I am. He stood there for a moment, completely stunned. The usual manipulation, the pleading, the guilt trips. All of it was coming. But I was done. I wasn't going to back down this time. Jake stood frozen in the doorway, staring at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, he just blinked like he couldn't comprehend what was happening. I could almost see the wheels in his head turning, trying to figure out how to get the situation back under control. But I wasn't going to let him. I wasn't going to be the victim in this anymore. Are you serious right now? He said, his voice rising slightly, the frustration clear. Mom told you I'm moving in. You can't just shut me out. I didn't flinch. I can do whatever I want in my own home, Jake. His face reddened and I could see the panic starting to set in. It was like watching a kid lose their toy, and it made me realize how much he had relied on others for everything. Mom and Dad mostly. But now he wasn't going to get his way with me. I stepped back, closing the door halfway, not wanting to make a scene in the hallway. But before I could fully close it, he shoved his foot in the gap, stopping me from shutting him out completely. Don't do this. I have nowhere else to go. His voice had lost its earlier confidence and now carried desperation. I'm sorry, Jake, but that's not my problem, I said calmly, feeling my heart pound in my chest, but forcing myself to stay steady. I told Mom I'm not okay with this. I told her I wasn't ready to have you here. You need to figure it out. His foot jammed further in the gap, and he pushed a little harder, trying to open the door, but I didn't budge. I wasn't giving in. Come on, just let me in. Jake's voice wavered now, no longer demanding but pleading. Mom will be mad if you don't. You know how she gets. She'll make everything worse for both of us. I could feel the guilt creeping in like it always did when he played the victim card. He was good at that, but this time I wasn't going to fall for it. I don't care, I said firmly, looking him dead in the eyes. You've always had someone to bail you out, but not anymore. Figure it out. Find somewhere else to stay. I watched as Jake's face twisted, a mixture of anger and helplessness flashing in his eyes. He couldn't believe I was actually doing this. It was like he couldn't understand that I'd finally set a boundary. For years, I had let him walk all over me. And now that I was taking control of my own life, he couldn't accept it. Fine, he spat, his voice low, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. You'll regret this, Emma. You always do. I didn't flinch. You'll be fine, Jake. You always are. Without another word, I finally closed the door. The sound of it clicking shut felt like the last barrier between my past and the new life I was trying to build. I leaned back against the door, my pulse still racing. The tension in my body didn't ease right away, but I knew I had done the right thing. I could hear him outside for a few minutes, pacing back and forth in the hallway, muttering to himself. I stayed inside, letting the quiet settle around me, trying to gather my thoughts. Mom called me an hour later. I let it ring 3 times before I finally picked up. Sweetie, what's going on? Jake said you shut him out. You can't just lock him out of your apartment like that. I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath before speaking. He's not moving in, Mom. I told you I wasn't okay with it. Emma, don't be so dramatic, she said, her voice sharp. You're being unreasonable. He needs help. He's your brother. I could hear her getting worked up on the other end, but I wasn't going to back down now. I don't care, I said, my voice steady. He's an adult and he can figure it out. I'm not just going to let him walk all over me anymore. You don't get to make decisions about my life without even asking me. If he needs help, he can figure it out somewhere else. Mom was silent for a moment, the tension between us growing. You're being selfish, she finally said, her voice dripping with disappointment. What happened to being a family? He's your brother. You're supposed to help him when he's in trouble. I've helped him for years, Mom, I snapped. I've done more than enough, but I can't keep sacrificing my own peace for him. You're making a mistake, Emma, she said quietly, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. You're making him feel like he's not welcome, and that's not what family does. I rubbed my temple, feeling the headache starting to build. Maybe he needs to feel that way for once. Maybe it's time he learns that he can't always rely on others to fix his problems. He needs to grow up. The line went quiet again, but I could still hear Mom breathing heavily, the tension on the other side of the phone almost palpable. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight. Do what you want, Emma, but don't expect me to be happy about it. With that, she hung up. I stared at my phone for a moment before setting it down on the counter. I had just cut off the last string of control my family had over me. There was no going back now. Jake wouldn't just move in and ruin my life like before. I had to hold my ground. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. There was more to come. Jake wouldn't let this go easily. And Mom, she'd probably keep calling me selfish until the end of time. But I didn't care anymore. Couldn't. I just needed to get through this. And then maybe I could start living the life I'd always wanted. A life where I wasn't always the one who had to fix everything. The days that followed were a mix of tense silence and uneasy phone calls. Jake didn't call me after the door incident, but I could feel his presence in the air, hovering like a storm cloud, ready to break. I thought I had made the right decision by standing my ground, but there was a nagging feeling in my gut. I knew my brother too well. If I thought he was just going to accept this and move on, I was wrong. It was a Wednesday evening when the first sign of trouble came. I had just returned home from work, still feeling the weight of the argument with Mom. The apartment was quiet, and I figured it would be a calm night. But as I walked to my door, I noticed something strange. A piece of paper wedged under the door. My heart skipped a beat as I bent down to pick it up, unfolding it carefully. It was a note from Jake. You don't get to just shut me out, Emma. I'll get in. You can't keep me out forever. The door's not the only way in. See you soon, Jay. I stood there staring at the paper in disbelief. My mind raced, processing the words. I had changed the locks. There was no way he could get in without a key. But this felt like a warning. It was like Jake wasn't just upset. He was escalating. The thought of him trying to break into my apartment made me feel sick. I couldn't let him do this. I couldn't let him make me feel unsafe in my own home. I quickly went to the door, double-checking the lock. It clicked securely, just as it had when I first installed the new one. But the unsettling feeling didn't go away. I felt like I was being watched, my every movement under scrutiny. The note had rattled me more than I cared to admit. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed in my living room, keeping the lights low, eyes fixed on the door. I didn't want to admit it, but I was scared. Not for my physical safety, but for what Jake might do next. He'd always been able to manipulate everyone around him, including me. But this was different. This time I wasn't going to let him have the control. The next day, things escalated even further. I was working from home when I heard a loud bang at my door. I froze. It wasn't a knock. It was a slam. I rushed to the peephole, heart hammering in my chest. There he was, Jake, standing in the hallway holding a crowbar. Couldn't believe it. My mind raced as I watched him jamming the tool into the door frame, trying to pry the door open. Jake! I shouted through the door, my voice shaking but trying to sound firm. What are you doing? He didn't answer, just kept pushing the crowbar deeper into the crack, grunting with frustration. I could hear the wood splintering, the sound enough to send a wave of panic through my chest. This wasn't just a temper tantrum anymore. This was an invasion. I backed away from the door, my mind working furiously. What was I supposed to do? Should I call Mom? No, that wouldn't help. This wasn't her problem anymore. It was mine. I grabbed my phone from the table, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. The operator picked up after 2 rings, and I tried to steady my voice. Hello, I need help, I said, my voice tight. Someone's trying to break into my apartment. They're using a crowbar on the door. I'm scared. The operator remained calm, asking for my address and reassuring me that the police were on their way. As I waited, I could hear Jake's grunts growing louder, the metal scraping against the door frame. My heart pounded in my ears, the seconds feeling like hours. I heard him shout, his voice muffled through the door. "You can't do this to me, Emma. You'll regret it. Let me in." My fingers clenched around the phone. "No, leave me alone, Jake," I shouted back, my voice trembling with both fear and anger. For a few moments there was silence. I thought maybe he had given up, but then the banging started again, louder this time. I could hear the door groaning under the pressure, the wood buckling with each strike. He wasn't going to stop until he got in. I backed away, looking around the apartment for something to defend myself with just in case. The thoughts were swirling in my head. Should I go out the window? Should I lock myself in the bedroom? I had never imagined my own brother would do something like this. My chest tightened with dread, and I found myself paralyzed with uncertainty. Suddenly, I heard sirens in the distance. The sound of police cars getting closer made my heart race with a mix of relief and fear. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep the door intact, and I didn't want Jake to hurt himself or me trying to break in. And then, just as the sirens neared, Jake let out a frustrated scream. "I hate you. I can't believe you're doing this to me." His words were punctuated by a final, desperate slam of the crowbar. I heard him step back and I hesitated, trying to listen for any sound that might indicate he was leaving. But it was too late. The door splintered, a jagged crack running across the middle. Jake had broken through. Before I could react, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. The police had arrived. "Police, step away from the door," a voice commanded. My heart leapt at the sound of the officers. Jake froze, his face turning pale as he realized what was happening. I could hear his breathing pick up, his eyes shifting nervously between the door and the officers. "Get back!" one of the officers shouted. "Drop the crowbar." Jake dropped it immediately, his eyes wide with fear. For a moment, I just stood there unable to move. My emotions were a jumbled mess of shock, relief, and disbelief at what had just transpired. My brother was still out there, his anger still smoldering, and I had no idea what would happen next. The officers moved in quickly, cuffing Jake and pulling him away from the door. He struggled, but they were fast, and within moments they had him restrained. I stood there, my breath coming in shallow gasps, trying to process everything. I had never imagined that it would come to this. The reality of the situation was sinking in. Jake had truly crossed the line, and I was no longer the one who could fix things for him. One of the officers knocked gently on my door and entered, giving me a reassuring glance. "We've got him. You're safe now." But even as I nodded in relief, a part of me felt a strange emptiness. I had lost my brother, and I wasn't sure if I would ever get him back. "Are you okay?" the officer asked, noticing the shock on my face. I took a deep breath, trying to hold it together. "I will be," I said quietly. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The police took Jake away in the back of their squad car, the sound of the engine fading as they drove off. My heart was still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline from the confrontation slowly wearing off. I felt like I was in some sort of surreal dream. My brother, the one I grew up with, the one I had always defended, had just tried to break into my apartment, my home, like a stranger, and I had to call the police on him. The officer who had been speaking to me, Officer Martinez, gave me a kind, understanding look as he stepped inside the apartment. "You've got a right to be shaken up," he said softly. "If you want, we can stay a little longer. Make sure you're all right." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "No, I'm okay. Thank you, though. I just need some time to process this." He nodded and placed a business card on the table. "Here's my number, just in case you need anything. If Jake contacts you or shows up again, call us immediately." I took the card with a nod, my fingers numb as I held it. "Thank you," I said again, my voice quiet, unsure of what else to say. After Officer Martinez left, I was alone. The apartment felt eerily quiet, the air thick with the weight of everything that had just happened. I walked through the living room, running my fingers along the edge of the table, not quite sure what to do next. My life had been turned upside down, and I wasn't sure how to fix any of it. I had always thought that no matter what, family was supposed to come first. But after what Jake had done, I realized how wrong I had been. It wasn't just about family. It was about respect, trust, and boundaries. Jake had crossed all of those lines, and I didn't know if there was a way back from this. The phone rang on the coffee table and I jumped. My stomach twisted as I saw the caller ID. It was Mom. I didn't want to answer, but I knew I had to. With a deep breath, I picked up. "Emma," she said, her voice strained and anxious. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I didn't know how to answer. "I'm fine, Mom. Physically, at least." My voice wavered as I added, "But Jake?" He tried to break into my apartment. I could hear her silence on the other end, followed by a soft sigh. "I don't know what's gotten into him. He's been so angry lately, but I never thought it would come to this." "I'm so sorry, Emma." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I've tried, Mom. I've tried to help him, but I can't do it anymore. He crossed a line, and I can't let him think this is okay." I heard a faint sniffle on the other end. "I understand. I'm just so worried about him. He's my son, and I don't know how to fix him. He needs help, Emma." I bit my lip, feeling the weight of her words. "I know he does, but I can't be the one to fix him anymore, Mom. I can't let him keep treating me like this." There was a long pause. I could hear Mom's breath hitching like she was trying to hold back tears. I know you can't, but he's still your brother." I closed my eyes, the words stinging more than I expected. "He's not the person I grew up with anymore, Mom, and I don't know if I can ever trust him again." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and I could feel the gap growing between us. "I'm sorry, Emma," she finally said, her voice small. "I'm sorry he did this to you." "I'm sorry too," I whispered, my own tears threatening to fall. "But I need some space. I need some time to think." "I understand," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I love you, Emma. We'll get through this. I promise." I hung up, feeling the weight of the conversation settle deep in my chest. I wasn't sure if things would ever go back to normal. I wasn't sure if I even wanted them to. The next few days were a blur. Jake's arrest was the talk of the family, but there was little support or comfort for me. Mom had tried to call several times, but I didn't have the energy to talk to her. I was too hurt, too confused, and deep down, I was scared. I didn't know what Jake was going to do once he got out of jail. What if he came after me again? I stayed in my apartment, keeping the blinds closed and the doors locked. Every time I heard a car pull up outside, my heart raced, wondering if it was Jake, but nothing happened. Days passed and then a week. The silence was almost as deafening as the confrontation itself. Then on the 8th day, I got a message from Jake. It was simple. "I'm sorry, Emma. I messed up. I just didn't know how else to deal with everything." I was angry. "Please, can we talk?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to block him and move on with my life. But another part of me, one that still remembered the brother I once had, felt a pang of sympathy. I sat there for what felt like hours, the message flashing on my phone screen. And in the end, I decided to respond. Not with forgiveness, but with boundaries. "You hurt me, Jake, and I can't let that go. You need help, but I can't fix you. I'm not your punching bag anymore. If you really want to make things right, start by getting the help you need. Until then, I can't talk to you." I hit send and set the phone down, feeling a strange sense of peace. It wasn't resolution, it wasn't closure, but it was the first step in healing for both of us. And with that, I closed the door on that chapter of my life. Now on to the next story. Story 6. At dinner, my toxic uncle shouted, "You're just the family failure who thinks a degree makes you special." The cousins laughed. My dad took a sip of beer. I said nothing. Then my grandfather cleared his throat and spoke one single sentence. Instantly, the room went silent. I didn't expect a war to break out over a glass of wine and a story about work, but that's exactly what happened. The night was supposed to be about my grandfather. His retirement party had been in the works for weeks. My aunt handled the venue, my mother arranged the guest list, and my cousins were tasked with setting up a photo slideshow that no one watched. It was one of those evenings where everyone pretended to be close, where fake smiles floated above wine glasses and old grudges simmered under the surface. I hadn't been around in a while. Work had kept me busy, but more than that, I'd quietly stepped away from the family over the years. I didn't really fit anymore. No one ever said it, but I felt it every time I walked into a room with them. Still, this was Grandpa's night. I showed up. I even brought a card. Dinner started well enough. There were toasts, half-hearted jokes, and awkward clapping. But somewhere between the main course and dessert, the mood shifted. My grandfather, looking sharper than most men half his age, raised his glass to thank everyone for coming. He gave a few heartfelt words about hard work, family, and legacy. Then, in the lull that followed, I made my mistake. I mentioned a promotion I'd received 2 weeks earlier. Director of Brand Strategy, something I'd worked toward for years. I wasn't bragging, at least I didn't think I was. I was just proud for once. I said a few things about how challenging the campaign was, how the client had tripled their budget after we hit the first milestones. Normal stuff. That's when my uncle scoffed loud enough that a fork paused midair in someone's hand. "You're just the family failure who thinks a degree makes you special." The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because they'd been building for a long time. Maybe because it wasn't the first time someone had said something like that behind my back. This time, though, he said it right to my face. My cousins laughed. My aunt didn't even try to hide her grin. My dad, sitting next to me, took a sip of his beer like nothing happened. Me? I said nothing. Not because I was scared, but because I suddenly understood something. This wasn't about me. It never had been. They'd made up their minds about me a long time ago. Nothing I did, no job, no success, no award was ever going to be enough for them. I wasn't supposed to win. The table fell into an awkward silence, except for the cousins still chuckling. Then my grandfather, who hadn't looked up from his plate in a while, cleared his throat. Just once. That one sound pulled everyone's attention. He put his utensils down, folded his napkin with a precision that felt practiced, and said the sentence that would burn itself into the walls of that restaurant forever. "She's the only one at this table who's ever made me proud." No one knew what to say. My uncle blinked like he'd misheard him. My dad looked down. My aunt muttered something about needing to use the restroom and didn't come back for 10 minutes. The waiter, who had been standing nearby holding the cake, slowly backed away. My grandfather wasn't finished. He let the silence hang until it felt unbearable. Then he looked at me and said we'd talk later, just the two of us. Nothing more. But that was enough. I didn't eat dessert. I just sat there as the tension swelled and settled like a storm cloud. Everyone kept glancing at him, then at me, like we were suddenly speaking a language they couldn't understand. No one knew it yet, but that moment was the crack that would split everything apart. The beginning of the unraveling, and he hadn't even gotten to the part about the inheritance yet. After the dinner, I figured things would go quiet. Maybe some awkward silence at the next family function or a few cold shoulders. But I wasn't expecting them to come after me like that. Not with apologies or guilt, but something much more desperate. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7:30 a.m. It was Grandpa. He didn't say much on the call, just told me to come over. Said he had something to show me. I got there within the hour. Same house, same faded yellow curtains in the kitchen window. He had coffee ready and 2 pieces of raisin toast like he always used to make when I'd visit as a kid. I sat down half expecting some kind of lecture or long-winded wisdom talk. But instead, he opened a drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and dropped it on the table. It was his will. He'd already signed the updated version. Everything was going to me. The house, the land, his savings, even the old boat he barely used anymore. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't asked for any of it. I didn't even know he was planning to update it. He told me he'd been watching everyone for years. Said he used to think he had a strong family, but time peeled the layers off. My uncle only called when something broke. My dad only came around when he needed to borrow money. And the cousins. He hadn't seen either of them in almost 3 years outside of holidays. I was the only one who still came by, still helped out without a reason. I sat there holding that like it was made of glass. He looked at me and said, "I want you to have it because you've never expected anything." That was it. I left with that envelope in my bag and the strangest feeling in my chest. Like something huge had just shifted and no one else knew it yet. But they found out fast. 2 days later, Erin texted me out of nowhere. Said she'd been thinking of me and missed our talks. We'd never had talks. She once told me my major was useless. Then Josh messaged me on LinkedIn. Said he admired my career path and wanted advice on switching industries. The guy used to call me Claire the tryhard behind my back. Then it got weirder. My uncle sent a gift basket to my apartment. Cheeses, wine, crackers. Like he thought he was wooing a client. There was a card inside. No apology. Just, "Hope this finds you well." My aunt texted the next day asking if I wanted to go to a spa. She said it was her treat. That woman hadn't spoken more than 10 words to me in a year. And then my dad, my own father, called me. Said he'd been doing some thinking and wanted to spend more time together. He asked if I wanted to go fishing just like when I was little, except we never went fishing when I was little. That was his thing with Josh. By the end of the week, I had 5 different let's catch up lunch invitations, 2 gift cards in my mailbox, and a voicemail from my mother that ended with, "We just want to be close again, sweetheart." At first, I thought they were just embarrassed about the dinner. But then I saw the look on my uncle's face when Grandpa called me by a nickname he hadn't used in years, Birdie, in front of everyone at brunch the following weekend. That's when I realized they knew. They knew about the will. Someone had told them, or maybe they just put it together from the way Grandpa acted after the dinner. Either way, it explained everything. The sudden affection, the fake interest, the gifts, the invitations, the compliments. They weren't trying to make peace. They were trying to secure their place in line. I went along with it. I smiled. I hugged them. I accepted the invitations, sat through painfully fake conversations, and watched them all try to rewrite history like they hadn't been cold and petty for years. I let them think they were winning me over. But I wasn't forgetting anything. Not how they laughed when my uncle humiliated me. Not how my dad looked away. Not how they dismissed everything I'd worked for like it was some hobby. They wanted to play nice now? Fine, let them. I had no plans to forgive them. I was just waiting for the moment they slipped, because the minute they did, I was going straight back to Grandpa. And when I told him the truth about everything they were doing, they'd lose more than an inheritance. They'd lose the one person they still thought they could manipulate. By the 3rd week, I realized they weren't just being nice, they were working me. It was like watching a low-budget play where everyone suddenly forgot their lines. My mother, who hadn't called me in months without some kind of passive dig, now called 3 times a week asking how I was sleeping. She even asked if I wanted her special lasagna for dinner. I didn't even like her lasagna. My cousin Erin started showing up on social media like a ghost that had never haunted me before, like on my old Instagram posts. Comments like "OMG, Queen" under photos I barely remembered posting. She DM'd me with a picture of us from some birthday party when we were kids, saying, "Remember this? We were so close." We weren't. She once told a guy I had a crush on in high school that I had lice just to humiliate me. Then Josh emailed me. Who even does that anymore? Said he wanted to pick my brain about marketing and maybe grab coffee if I had time. He used to call me a tryhard every Thanksgiving without fail. Now he was all business casual and networking tone. My uncle dropped off a bottle of wine at my apartment just because. My aunt sent me a scarf in the mail with a note that said, "Thought of you when I saw this." The tag was still on it, clearance. They weren't even trying hard enough to hide it. And then, of course, my dad tried the fishing line again. Same invite, same story. Wanted to reconnect and get back to how things used to be. The truth is, things were never good between us. He wasn't abusive or cruel, just cold, indifferent. He'd only ever shown emotion when he was angry or drunk. Now he was trying to play the part of Father of the Year. It all built up to the family barbecue Grandpa decided to host. one of those end-of-summer things he used to love before Grandma passed. Everyone came, and for the first hour, it was almost convincing. Fake smiles, over-enthusiastic laughter, everyone offering to help clean up or carry trays. But underneath all that tension, my uncle cornered me near the grill. He told me he'd been thinking a lot about what he said at the dinner, and that maybe he went too far. Then, without missing a beat, he asked if Grandpa had been acting strange lately or saying anything about changing things. I told him Grandpa was sharper than all of us. He laughed awkwardly, like he was joking, but I saw it, the angle. He was trying to plant the seed that Grandpa was senile. He wasn't just groveling anymore. He was preparing for battle. I stayed quiet. I didn't argue, didn't react. I wanted him to keep talking. The more rope he gave me, the better. 2 days later, I went to Grandpa's house. I told him everything. Every move they'd made since the dinner, every awkward lunch, fake apology, random gift, and forced conversation. I told him what my uncle said about his mind. He didn't look surprised, just nodded and poured himself a drink. Then he told me what he was going to do next. No more monthly checks to my dad. No more loan forgiveness for my uncle. No more quiet cash transfers to help them out of their own messes. He was pulling the plug while he was still here to watch. He was done pretending. They'd made their choice years ago. And then he said something that stuck with me. They'll show their real faces when the money dries up. And when they do, you'll know exactly who they are. He was right. That weekend, my phone lit up with angry messages. My dad accused me of manipulating Grandpa. My uncle left a voicemail saying I was splitting the family. My mom cried again, told me she didn't raise me to be cruel. Aaron unfollowed me on everything. Josh posted some vague meme about snakes in the grass. It was like a switch flipped. 1 second they were love-bombing me, and the next they were back to who they really were, bitter, entitled, furious. But I wasn't the same either. I didn't need their approval. I had leverage now. I had the truth and I had Grandpa. Now they were the ones tiptoeing, wondering what I might say next, wondering how much I'd tell him. They thought I was done, though. I was just getting started. 2 weeks passed in a silence that felt unnatural. Not peaceful, but strategic, like they were regrouping. No calls, no passive messages, no guilt trips or fake affection. Just radio silence from every direction. I kept telling myself it was over, that maybe they'd accepted Grandpa's choice and backed off. But somewhere deep down, I knew better. That family didn't back off. They waited and then they struck. Started small. A plain envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a printed copy of an old version of Grandpa's will. The one that split everything evenly between the family. No notes, no explanation. Just that, and one handwritten line across the bottom. He's not going to live forever. Think carefully. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. A subtle one. Sure. But I knew exactly what they were trying to say. I kept the letter and didn't respond. I waited to see what would come next. Then my neighbor mentioned something strange. Said she saw someone sitting in a black SUV down the street a couple evenings in a row. Just sitting there with the engine running. No lights on, no one getting out. When she walked by, the windows rolled up. I checked my building's security footage. Sure enough, Josh was just sitting in the car. Not coming to the door, not even looking at his phone, just watching. Then Grandpa's house was hit. Someone cut the lock on his garage. Nothing was taken, not the tools, not the old safe, not even his bike. But the drawers in his office were opened. The cabinet with his files was left ajar. It was clear they were looking for something. They didn't want to steal. They wanted to erase proof of something, or maybe the new will. I went straight over. I told Grandpa everything. The SUV, the letter, the garage. He listened, then stood up, walked into his room, and came back with a red folder. Inside were notarized copies of the new will, banking documents, legal letters, everything duplicated and time-stamped with digital backups on a flash drive. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "They won't touch this, but they're going to learn what happens when they try." Then he told me to show up the next evening. He'd invited the whole family over. Said it was important. I arrived early. The living room was already set up with chairs like a boardroom. Grandpa sat in his usual spot by the fireplace, sipping black coffee like it was a regular Tuesday. One by one, they came in. My uncle looked confused. My dad looked irritated. Aaron and Josh came together, quiet and fidgeting. My aunt hovered by the doorway like she might bolt at any second. My mom barely looked at me. Once everyone sat, Grandpa didn't waste time. He said he knew someone had broken into his garage. He said he knew someone had been following me. He mentioned the letter, the surveillance, the threats, every detail. You should all be ashamed, he said. You lost your share not because of Claire, but because of yourselves. He didn't stop there. He said he was withdrawing financial support, effective immediately. Every quiet deposit into their accounts, done. Every loan he co-signed, being recalled. Every arrangement he'd ever quietly agreed to over the years, mortgage assistance, tuition help, car payments, canceled. And then he pulled out one more document and dropped it on the coffee table. It was a disownment clause, legally binding. The room dropped into chaos. My uncle accused him of being manipulated. My mom started crying, saying he was being cruel. Aaron demanded to know if I was blackmailing him. Josh asked if there was anything he could do to fix it. And Grandpa, in the middle of all this, just leaned back and said, "You made your choices. Now live with them." But later that night, something happened I didn't expect. I found a second envelope in my mailbox. No letter this time, just a photo. It was of me at a gas station getting into my car, and written on the back in the same handwriting from before, "Don't push too far." That's when I knew this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. They were angry, desperate, and if I didn't do something, it might get worse. So, I made a decision. If they wanted war, I'd give them one. But on my terms. The photo changed everything. It wasn't the fact that someone was watching me. That part I'd already suspected. It was the way they chose to show it, slipping it into my mailbox like a warning. No words, just that shaky handwriting on the back. "Don't push too far." It didn't scare me. Confirmed what I needed to know. They were unraveling. They didn't know how to win, so now they were trying to corner me. I didn't tell Grandpa. Not yet. I needed time not to run but to build. I started documenting everything. Not just the letters or the creepy photo. I compiled screenshots of texts, emails, DMs. I even printed off posts and messages where Josh had mocked me in the past and lined them up next to the new, overly friendly ones he'd sent recently. Aaron's entire shift in behavior, from ignoring me for years to calling me babe and asking for coffee, was tracked down to the date. I created a timeline, a paper trail. I even backed it all up on a hard drive. And then I set the trap. I started responding. I didn't go full cold. That would have raised suspicion. I was polite, warm even, just enough to pull them in. I said, "I'd love to grab coffee." I agreed to a walk with my mom. I let my uncle call and rant about how the family used to mean something. I nodded. I listened. I took notes. Then I met Erin for lunch. She arrived with a forced smile and watery eyes like she practiced her guilt in the mirror. Before we even ordered, she was talking about healing the family and how she thought we all let things go too far. She made it sound like a misunderstanding, like Grandpa's will had been changed because of tension and miscommunication. I didn't say much until I pulled out the photo. I slid it across the table and watched her eyes freeze on it. I told her I had the original. I told her I'd had the handwriting compared, and I already knew it matched the last letter she sent. She opened her mouth to deny it, but I didn't give her the chance. I said there was a folder with every detail of what they'd been doing. Photos, letters, messages, the garage break, and even the stakeouts. And I told her if I ever saw another threat or felt someone watching me again, I wouldn't call the cops. I'd call Grandpa. She cracked. First came the denial, then the tears, then the quiet begging. Said it was just a way to get my attention. Said she didn't know Josh was actually going to take a photo. Said it wasn't supposed to scare me. I didn't say a word. I stood, dropped enough cash to cover the check, and walked away. By that night, she deleted every post she tagged me in. Josh did the same 2 days later, after his own little meeting with me in a public park where I calmly laid out the same consequences. I told him straight, "You keep pushing, and I start talking. My uncle was harder. He acted like he still had control. He tried to spin the situation, said he was worried about Grandpa's mental state, that he didn't trust what you've got him believing. That's when I told him this wasn't about belief. I had facts, I had proof, and I had the entire thing backed up 3 ways. If he thought Grandpa was a threat, he hadn't even seen what I was capable of. He tried to laugh it off. I didn't. Then I gave them the new terms. From now on, they don't contact Grandpa without me present. They don't visit unannounced. They don't show up at my job, my apartment, or any place I'm known to go. If I hear so much as a whisper that one of them is still trying to fix things behind my back, I release everything to Grandpa, to the lawyer, and if I have to, the media. Suddenly, they vanished. The fake love dried up. The smiles disappeared. Josh stopped trying to talk branding with me. Erin deactivated her second account. My dad didn't call. My uncle didn't even send a card for Grandpa's birthday. But the best part? Grandpa noticed. He asked me why things were so quiet. I just told him, maybe they're finally reflecting. He nodded like he already knew that wasn't the case. But he didn't press. He didn't need to, because now they all knew I wasn't afraid of losing them. They were afraid of losing everything, and I was the one holding the match. I thought that would be the end of it. After the threats, the folder, the rules, I figured they'd scatter like roaches under light. But people like them don't give up. They recalculate. Started small again. A few weeks after the silence, my mom reached out, this time with something new. Sincerity, or at least what looked like it. She said she wanted to talk. Just the 2 of us. No guilt trips, no family politics. Just a conversation. Against my better judgment, I said yes. We met at a quiet diner. One of those old highway stops with worn booths and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting since morning. She brought an envelope with her, and I knew immediately it wasn't just about reconnecting. Inside were photocopies of text messages between me and Erin, between me and Josh, even a photo of me meeting with my uncle. Everything I'd done to get them talking, to bait them into revealing the truth. It was all printed out and highlighted. She smiled like she had me cornered. She said, if Grandpa saw these, it might look like I was manipulating them, not the other way around. She said she wasn't trying to threaten me, but if I kept pushing, if I kept holding the family hostage, she'd have no choice but to protect what's left. That's when I knew they'd never stop trying. I slid the envelope back to her and stood up without a word. But I wasn't shaken, not even a little, because what she didn't know is I'd recorded the entire conversation. Every word, her tone, her subtle threats, her admission of what they were really trying to do. And 2 days later, I played it for Grandpa. He didn't interrupt once, just listened stone-faced. Then he asked me to forward the audio to his attorney. Said it was time to put everything in writing, not just the will. He wanted it public. Filed, notarized, locked. No more gray areas, no more quiet threats, no more back doors. I asked him if he was sure. He said he'd never been more sure of anything. Then he made one final decision. He removed both of his sons, my dad and my uncle, from power of attorney, replaced them with me. Every financial decision, every medical directive, every legal fallback, mine. When the family found out, the meltdown was immediate. My dad called and left a 4-minute voicemail that started calm and ended in screaming. My uncle sent a long email with legal jargon and vague threats about reconsidering your position. Erin texted me 6 times in 1 hour. Josh tried to call me from a blocked number. My mom just sent one text, "You'll regret this." But I didn't, because now they couldn't touch anything. Not the house, not the accounts, not Grandpa, not me. And just when I thought things were settling down again, I got a call from my uncle. I answered out of curiosity. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't ask for anything. He said they were done. That I'd won. That they'd stop fighting, stop pushing. That they wanted peace now. I let the silence hang. Then I said, "I'll believe that when you stop pretending." He started to say something else, but I cut him off. And just so we're clear, if anything happens, anything at all, I go straight to Grandpa. And this time I tell him everything. Every call, every threat, every lie. You make one wrong move and I burn the whole thing down. He hung up. They haven't bothered me since. No texts, no calls, no anonymous letters. It's been quiet, eerily so. But now I know why. Because they're not scared of Grandpa anymore. They're scared of me. Now on to the next story. Story 7. I borrowed your card for gas, my mom said. By morning, the balance was zero. $5,200 gone. Dad chuckled. Consider it your donation. I didn't argue. I just did one quiet action. What she saw made her scream so loud the whole neighborhood heard her. I had exactly $5,200 in my account when I went to bed. I remember that number like it's carved into the back of my brain. That was all I had left to get through the month after rent, groceries, and bills. I had plans for that money, mostly survival, a little bit of breathing room. Nothing extravagant, just enough to not panic every time I swiped my card. So, when my mom sent that casual text at 10:43 p.m., I borrowed your card for gas. Hope you don't mind. I didn't freak out. She's done that before. 20 here, 30 there. It was annoying, sure, but I let it slide. She raised me. I owed her something, right? That's what I kept telling myself. But when I woke up the next morning and opened my banking app, I wasn't expecting to feel my stomach cave in on itself. Available balance, $0. I blinked, closed the app, reopened it. I thought maybe the app had glitched or maybe I was looking at the wrong account. I wasn't. The transaction history told me everything. Target, $412.93. Best Buy, $945. Shell Gas, $63.22. Home Goods, $229.77. Massage Envy, $144. Apple.com, $1,299. And it went on. I scrolled and scrolled, and my chest got tighter with every swipe. It was like watching someone set fire to your bank account in slow motion. I called my mom. She picked up like nothing was wrong. She said she and Dad had gone out for a little shopping. Said they needed a few things and figured I wouldn't miss the money. She actually laughed and said they'd make it up to me eventually. Then I heard my dad in the background say something like, "Consider it your donation to the family fund." He laughed. I didn't. I just said, "Okay." Then I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even call them back. I just sat on the edge of my bed for a long time staring at the wall, wondering what kind of people do this to their own daughter. But I already knew the answer. 6 months ago, I had gifted them a car, a silver 2018 Nissan Rogue. It was supposed to be a surprise for their anniversary. I bought it in full using my bonus from my last job and told them it was theirs, no strings. What I didn't mention, and what they obviously forgot, was that the title was still in my name. I never transferred it. I don't even know why. Something told me to keep that one thread connected. That night, after the sun went down, I grabbed the spare key I kept in my desk drawer, called up my friend Jenna, and told her I needed a ride. We didn't talk much on the drive. We just headed straight to my parents' house. The car was right there in the driveway, looking untouched. I unlocked it, slid into the seat, and drove away like a ghost in the dark. No noise, no headlights. I just rolled off their property like it had never belonged to them. Back at my place, I parked it 3 blocks away off a side street under a tree. Then I waited. At 7:12 a.m., the first text came from my mom. Then the missed calls started, then my dad, then my mom again. By 7:45, I got a call from our neighbor, Mrs. Lindell, who's half-deaf and never wakes up before noon. She asked me if I knew what was going on. She said she'd heard my mother screaming like someone got murdered. And no, I didn't answer any of their texts. They still didn't know where the car was. They couldn't reach me. They didn't know I had every legal right to take it. But the best part came at exactly 10:16 a.m. when someone buzzed the front door of my apartment. I looked through the peephole. There they were, standing outside in the cold, pissed off and fresh out of a taxi. And that's when the real fun started. I saw them coming from my window before they ever hit the buzzer. A yellow cab pulled up right to the curb. My mom was in the back seat, already mid-rant. My dad was sitting next to her with that stiff jaw he gets when he's trying to look calm but wants to throw something. The moment they stepped out, I knew they hadn't slept. She kept looking around like she expected the car to be parked nearby, like maybe this was all just some kind of joke. My dad pulled his phone out and started tapping furiously, probably still trying to track the car or figure out if I'd taken it to get serviced or something. Then they buzzed my apartment. I let it ring twice before I pressed the door button. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask who it was. I just let them in. My apartment's on the second floor. I could hear them stomping up the stairs like they were going to kick the door off its hinges. I opened it before they knocked. Neither of them said hi. My mom brushed right past me like she lived there. My dad followed, quieter than usual. They both stood in the middle of my living room looking completely out of place, like strangers who walked into the wrong house. The silence only lasted 10 seconds. Then it started. "Where's the car? Why are you doing this? Are you out of your mind? We needed that car. You have no right." I just stood there and let them unload everything. I didn't say a word until they finally slowed down. And even then, I only asked one thing. "What did you spend my $5,200 on?" That shut them up for a second. My mom looked like she didn't even remember the number. My dad made this weak attempt at deflecting, saying something like, "We picked up a few essentials. Stuff for the house." Essentials like the $1,300 iPad, the 75-inch TV, the massage chair pad, the $299 air purifier for a room they don't even go in, the leather recliner. I read the transactions. I even called the card company to verify the locations. They spent everything on junk they didn't need and never asked if they could. I told them straight up, I took the car because I wasn't going to let two people who just cleared out my bank account drive around in something I paid for. My mom lost it. She said the car was a gift. I said so was the $5,200. Apparently, the energy shifted real fast. My dad started accusing me of being dramatic, saying I was trying to punish them and embarrass them. My mom said I was selfish, that family helps each other, and that I wouldn't even be here without her. They were yelling louder now. My neighbor from across the hall opened his door and peeked out. I saw his shadow move. He didn't say anything, just listened. I didn't yell back. I didn't match their energy. I just walked to the front door, opened it wide, and stood there. They didn't move. I told them they needed to leave, that we weren't going to scream at each other in my apartment. They hesitated like they thought I'd back down. I didn't. My mom eventually grabbed her purse and stormed out. My dad followed her, but not before saying, "This isn't over." I didn't respond. I shut the door behind them. For the first time in months, I felt clear, like something heavy had finally been pulled off my chest. That clarity lasted a solid 2 hours. Then, I got a text from my brother, Colin. He lives 20 minutes away and never gets involved in anything unless it's already halfway on fire. His message said, "Mom and Dad just showed up at my place in a cab. They're flipping out. Want me to come over?" I didn't answer right away because I already knew what was coming. They told their version. I had a feeling Colin was about to hear mine. And after that, the last bit of control they thought they had over the situation was gone. Colin doesn't get involved unless it's serious. He's the kind of person who lets things slide even when he shouldn't because he'd rather keep the peace than start a fight. That's how it's always been between us. I'd speak up and he'd smooth things over, especially when it came to our parents. So, when he knocked on my door that afternoon, I was already bracing myself. I thought he'd come in with some guilt trip speech, trying to talk me into returning the car, patching things up, and keeping the family together. He didn't. He stepped inside, sat down on the edge of the couch, looked at me, and just said, "Tell me everything from the beginning." So I did. I walked him through it all. The text from Mom about borrowing my card, waking up to an empty bank account, the long list of charges. All of it on garbage. Things no one needs when they're supposedly struggling. Designer gadgets, fancy lamps, a Bluetooth-enabled cat-shaped foot massager. He didn't interrupt once. He just listened while I showed him the transaction history and pointed out how none of it was for food or rent or emergencies. It was shopping, plain and simple. Stupid shopping. When I told him about calling them and how they brushed it off like it was nothing, how Dad laughed and said it was a donation, Colin's whole expression changed. He just sat there, eyes fixed on my phone screen. Then he asked quietly, "They didn't even ask you first?" I said, No, they didn't ask. They didn't warn me. They didn't apologize. They just took. He rubbed his face with both hands and stood up, pacing, which he never does. Then he just said, "All right, give me 20 minutes. I didn't ask where he was going. I already knew. 25 minutes later, I got a text. At their place. We're talking. Another half hour passed and then another text. They're pissed. But I laid it out. I told them they were wrong completely. I told them if they want to keep any kind of relationship with either of us, they better fix this. That hit me. Either of us. He'd never drawn a line like that before. Turns out they'd already been to his house before coming to mine. They showed up, told him I stole the car, said I'd gone unhinged, and made it sound like I was unstable and trying to ruin their lives for no reason. They left out every single thing about draining my account. Colin said once he heard my side with receipts, there wasn't a single doubt in his mind. He told them straight up, "You took her money, you lied about it, and now you want sympathy because she took back the car that she legally owns? You're lucky that's all she took." He said my dad told him to mind his own business. My mom cried and said I'd humiliated them. Colin told them to grow up, that I wasn't a piggy bank, and that if they couldn't take responsibility, they didn't deserve anything from me. Then he left. And while he was dealing with that circus, I was doing what they clearly never expected me to do. I was moving on. I cleaned out the car, took fresh pictures, and listed it online for $12,000. Within 2 hours, I had multiple offers. One guy offered $10,000 on the spot if I could meet him that night. I held out. By the next day, someone came by with a mechanic, checked everything, handed me $11,000 in cash, and drove away. I watched that car disappear down the street without a single second of hesitation. It was never theirs to begin with. The guy who bought the car pulled up in a beat-up truck with rusted doors but cash in hand. He brought a mechanic, did a quick inspection, checked the VIN, asked a few basic questions, and didn't flinch when I told him $11,000 firm. He handed over the envelope. I signed the bill of sale, and just like that, it was gone. I watched the rogue roll away from the curb and disappear into traffic. No hesitation, no second thoughts. That should have been the end. I took a long walk, grabbed a coffee, and sat in the park thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe the chapter is closed. But if I've learned anything from my parents, it's that they never end anything quietly. Later that night, Colin called. He didn't even say hello. He just said, "You're not going to believe this. They tried reporting the car stolen. Not to the police, thankfully they weren't that bold, but to the dealership they assumed I bought it from. Apparently, they called and claimed their daughter had stolen the car they paid for and that they were considering legal action. The dealership asked for the VIN, which my dad had saved in a photo from the day I gave them the car. The guy at the dealership paused, then told them the car had a flagged manufacturer recall, something with the airbag system and electrical wiring, and it had been eligible for a buyback. That caught their attention real fast. The dealership guy explained that under the recall, the original registered owner, me, would have been offered a $13,500 refund if the car was returned directly to the manufacturer within the recall period. I had never opened the letters. I remembered seeing something official-looking come in the mail months ago, but I tossed it aside thinking it was just one of those boring safety notices. Now, here's where it gets funny. My parents were furious, not because of the recall, but because they realized they missed out on that $13,500. They thought they could guilt me into giving the car back, maybe even sell it themselves if they played their cards right. But now it was gone, and I got less than what I could have, which was a loss for me but a complete slap in the face for them. Colin said my dad ranted for an hour straight about how ungrateful I was, that I should have told them about the recall, that I should have waited. My mom cried, not because of what they did to me, but because they felt cheated out of money they thought they deserved. Not once did they mention the $5,200 they took from my account. Not once did they say they were sorry. But I didn't care. I had $11,000 in cash. My bills were covered for the next few months. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't owe anyone anything. Or so I thought. 3 days later, I was cooking dinner when someone rang my doorbell. Not the buzzer, the actual doorbell, which meant someone was already standing right outside. I opened the door and felt my stomach twist. It was them again. my mom, my dad, and someone standing behind them. I had to squint for a second. Then it hit me, Uncle Rick. I hadn't seen him since I was 17. He and my dad hadn't spoken in almost 10 years after some massive fallout that ended with Rick getting cut off completely. All I ever heard growing up was that he'd stolen from our grandma, though something about that story always felt off. And yet, here he was. He gave me a quick nod and stepped forward right past my parents like they didn't matter. "I heard what they did," he said. "Figured you could use someone in your corner." I looked at my parents for the first time, and they didn't look angry. They looked cornered. Apparently, Colin had called Rick and told him everything, word for word. The money, the manipulation. And Rick, who had once been downed for speaking out, decided this time he wasn't going to stay quiet. My parents started talking over each other, trying to explain, twisting details, saying things like misunderstanding and temporary borrowing. Rick turned around, cut them off mid-sentence and said, "You emptied her account, and now you're mad she didn't let you keep her car. You two don't need a daughter. You need a mirror." I swear the silence in the hallway was louder than any scream. They left without another word. And that's when things started to shift. After the moment in the hallway, when Uncle Rick stared them down and told them the truth they'd never admit out loud, I didn't hear a single word from either of them. Not a text, not a call, no surprise visits, no vague Facebook posts that I knew were about me. Just silence. It lasted longer than I expected. 5 full days passed and I was starting to think maybe that was it. Maybe I'd actually scared them off for good. Or maybe they doubled down and decided I didn't exist. Then Colin texted me, "They've been quiet, but they asked me today if you're okay." I didn't answer. Not because I was being petty, but because I genuinely didn't know what to say. After everything, they suddenly wanted to know how I was. Colin followed up an hour later. "I think they're finally starting to understand. Rick really hit something in them." Apparently, after they left my apartment, Rick didn't just disappear. He followed them back to their house, walked in behind them, and made himself at home. They didn't stop him. He sat down at their kitchen table uninvited and told them point blank that they were the kind of parents who would drive their own child into debt and still feel entitled to more. He told them they'd become the villains in their own story and didn't even realize it. And they listened. Not politely, not quietly, but they didn't throw him out. Rick told me later that my mom tried to deflect at first. She said she just didn't think it was a big deal, that she thought I had more saved. But when Rick asked why she didn't even check before draining my card, she went quiet. My dad didn't say much during the conversation, just sat there. Apparently, he stared at his phone for a long time before standing up and walking out of the room. Rick didn't stop talking. He told her how I was the one who actually gave in this family, how I'd bought the car, covered dinners, sent them birthday gifts even when I could barely afford my rent. He asked her, and I'll never forget this, "When's the last time you gave her something without expecting something back?" That was what finally cracked her. Rick said she broke down crying. Not performative, attention-seeking tears like I was used to, but silent, heavy crying, the kind that catches people off guard because it looks like the truth bleeding through the denial. She didn't say much else. Rick left them like that. 3 more days went by. I started to feel the weight of everything that had happened settling in. I wasn't angry anymore, just drained. Like I'd climbed out of a collapsing house and was finally standing in the sunlight. But I didn't have the energy to move. Then Colin showed up. No warning. He just knocked once and waited outside with a small manila envelope in his hand. I opened the door and let him in without a word. He sat down and slid the envelope across the table. "I know it's not everything, but it's close." Inside was a check for $5,000 from his personal account. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't feel like revenge. It didn't even feel like closure. It felt like the final puzzle piece of a picture I never wanted to see clearly. I asked why he was giving it to me. He said, "Because I'm embarrassed for them. And honestly, for me, I should have spoken up sooner. I watched them take advantage of you over and over and kept telling myself it wasn't my business. But it was. It always was." I asked if they knew he was doing this. They didn't ask me to, but they're going to know I did. And I hope it makes them feel every bit of shame they should have felt the second they touched your card. He paused. They want to apologize. I told them that's not up to me. That's up to you. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Later that night, I got a single message from my mom. Not long, just a few lines. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I don't know who we became, but I know I don't like them either. And then, thank you for not becoming like us. It wasn't perfect. It didn't undo anything, but it was the first message from her that didn't try to spin the story. I read it once, then I deleted it. I didn't need it. I already had everything I needed. I used to think closure came from conversations, big, emotional, messy ones where people cry, admit they were wrong, and suddenly become better. But that's not how it happened for me. My closure didn't come from an apology. It didn't come from seeing my mom cry or my dad go silent for once. It didn't come from a check or some dramatic confrontation. It came from the space I created once I stopped explaining myself. I deposited the $5,000 from Colin 2 days after he handed it to me. I didn't call him, didn't text him, didn't say thanks right away. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because I needed time to just sit in the silence. I paid off my credit card, cleared my rent 3 months ahead, and bought groceries without doing math in my head. For the first time in a long time, I walked through a store without flinching at every price tag. I started sleeping through the night again. Colin texted me a few times that week. He never brought up our parents. Just casual stuff. A meme, a link to an old show we used to watch. A video of a dog riding a skateboard. I think he was checking on me without checking on me. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought maybe it was a delivery. I looked through the peephole and I froze. It was my mom alone. No makeup, no dramatic posture. No keys in her hand like she was ready to come in and take over the conversation. Just standing there with a paper envelope and a face I hadn't seen since I was a kid, before the manipulation, before the guilt, before all the excuses. I opened the door but didn't say a word. She didn't ask to come in, didn't force a hug. She held the envelope out and said quietly, "I know it doesn't fix anything." That was it. She didn't wait for a response. Just turned and walked away down the hall. Inside the envelope was $200 in cash and a note written in shaky handwriting. "This is the first time I've ever tried to give you something without expecting something back. I sold my jewelry, just a few pieces. I know it's nothing, but it's mine. Not from your dad. Not from Colin. Just me." I sat on the floor and held that note for a long time. Not crying, not angry. The money didn't matter. It could have been $5 or a single dollar bill. But for the first time in my life, my mother had done something that didn't come with strings or guilt or a lecture. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't even ask to talk. It didn't undo the $5,200 or the years of emotional sabotage or the phone call where she laughed while telling me they'd spent everything I had. But it told me one thing. She understood, or at least she was starting to. That night, I called Colin and told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "She hasn't spoken to Dad since last week." "Not really. She's been sleeping on the couch. I think she's embarrassed. I don't think she knows how to come back from it." And I told him the truth. I don't want her to come back. I want her to move forward. He understood. That was the last time we talked about it. Now, when I think about my parents, I don't feel that knot in my stomach anymore. I don't flinch when my phone buzzes. I don't lie awake trying to figure out how to make them proud or prove that I'm worth respecting. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. And I think that's what real healing looks like. Not a big moment, not some dramatic final scene. Just finally reaching the point where you're no longer waiting for someone else to make you feel whole. I'm not holding my breath for another apology. I'm not waiting for them to change. They can if they want to, but I'm not standing in the doorway anymore. I closed it, and this time it wasn't out of spite or pain. It was out of peace, the kind you build yourself once you stop giving everyone else the blueprint. The update. It had been 2 weeks since my mom left that envelope at my door. 2 weeks of complete quiet. No texts, no calls, no drama. I had gotten used to the silence. It was nice, actually. Peaceful. My apartment finally felt like a place I lived in, not a war zone waiting to erupt. I started waking up early again. I was eating better, sleeping better. I even signed up for a gym membership. Nothing crazy, just a few small things I'd put off for years. Then, completely out of the blue, Colin called. "Hey," he said. "Are you sitting down?" I thought something was wrong. Then he said, "Dad wants to talk to you. Like, actually talk. And I think he's serious." I almost laughed. I asked if this was a joke. "No." Colin said he's been quiet for days. Last night he told me he's been thinking about how he's handled everything. He said he feels sick about it. He didn't ask me to pass along a message. He said if you want, he'll come to you. No pressure. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know what to say. Colin didn't push. He just said he's not the same this week. He's been quieter. Stays in the garage a lot. Mom's still on the couch. They're not fighting, but they're not pretending either. It's weird. I told him I needed time to think. The next day I got a letter. Not a text, not an email, a real letter in my dad's handwriting. No envelope, just folded paper left at my door. Inside was a single paragraph. No fluff, no excuses. Just this. "I was wrong about the money, about the car, about how I've treated you. I thought I was still the parent in this relationship, but you've been the adult for a long time now. I don't expect anything from you, but I'd like the chance to learn something from you if you ever decide you're open to that." That was it. I don't know yet if I'll call him. I'm not in a rush. But for the first time, my dad didn't try to defend himself. He didn't use humor to hide behind. He just said the one thing he'd never said to anyone in this family. He was wrong. That on its own felt like something I never thought I'd live to see. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of the story after all. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.